It is the greatest spectacle in all of racing, and for over 100 years, drivers from across the globe have flocked to Speedway, Indiana to challenge man and machine. Sim racers globally have joined in on the challenge, pitting the world's best on the iRacing service against one another, with engineering acumen playing a vital role in the week-long grind that is the iRacing Indy 500. So as global motorsports ground to a halt, a new challenge emerged. A fixed setup meant equal cars and equal chances, all while leaving destiny in the driver's control. Karam, a real-world IndyCar driver that came out on top, but as he saddles up for his 8th crack at this famed race in the real world, we have 33 drivers with equal cars, equal chances, but one shot at taking glory here in the 2nd annual iRacing Fixed 500. Hello and welcome to RaceSpotTV and coverage of the month of May. My name is Arjuna Kenkapati, alongside in the commentary both as we get underway with the 2nd annual running of the Fixed 500. The month of May is well and truly into swing as the cars on the track, not just in the real world, but in the virtual, provided to us by Esteban Ballo and TrackCams22.com, with additional car cameras designed by RaceSpot's own Tyler Maxson. You can follow along with live timing and scoring by heading to RaceSpot.d. We are just a few moments away from getting trackside to take a look at the grid here in this 2nd annual Fixed 500. And I guess what? It's only one thing that you can do when you come to Speedway, Indiana at this time, and that is play back home in Indiana.
Back home again. And it seems that I can see the gleaming light still burning bright through the sycamores for me. The sends all its fragrance through the fields I used to roam. Dream about the moonlight on the wabash, how I long for my Indiana.
Traditions are what make this race so special in the real world, and over the last 12 years we have been building up those traditions here on the iRacing service as well. We are just a couple of minutes away from getting underway from this race. Let's bring in my co-commentators for the very first time. Alongside is Justin Prince and Somal Aurora. And Justin, you and I have been commentating on a lot of IndyCar action over the past couple of months here in 2021. Here though, the month of May, 33 cars, equal chances for all of the drivers with a fixed setup. However, a slight change when it was all fixed. No in-car tools, in-car adjustments, any of that. Drivers here today, they do have in-car tools to help them out.
Yes, that is indeed the case with 4 drivers to adjust throughout today's race. That will mean that drivers will need to have that preparation down to be able to know that knowledge, to be able to know, okay, what sort of weight jacker and ARB settings do we need for the short run, for the long run, to be able to make passes. All of that's going to be very vital for this race, because if you want to win here at Indianapolis, you need to be able to execute on everything from the jump.
And Somal, quickly over to you. Only 30 seconds left before the cars roll out onto track to get underway. Strategy is going to be important here. You have to work backwards in a race like this where 30 laps.
Absolutely. For the teams and the drivers, it's going to be so interesting to backtrack and understand and actually play it out in context of what's happening on the track, because some really wreck things up.
And so with that said, it was a week-long qualifying procedure for these cars. Started on Monday, ended last night before the first of these Fixed 500s. 33 drivers have qualified their way into this top split on a Saturday afternoon. Let's go trackside and take a look at our starting grid here today. So on the pole, representing Team Talent, it's Philip Kraus in the 7. Lots of confidence on his side. What can he do alongside Jose Soria for the Oris Racing team? Wilson Neto, always a strong qualifier here in Speedway, Indiana. Only 1/10 separating the top 3 cars. He'll line to the inside of Ojan Walsh. Robert Malechko, winner in the Lionheart Speedway Series just a couple of weeks ago. He'll be inside of Michael Romandis for the Williams Esports team on row number 3 with Zeke Willis and Yao Romanoff on row 4. Brandon Trost inside of Rodrigo Franzoni on the edge of the top 10 with Ryan Doucette, a eNASCAR Coca-Cola driver, alongside Casey Curran, also a World Championship competitor. Jesper Orman inside of Polino Ferreira with Carlos Villegas and Jason Brophy on row number 8. 2020 Open Wheel 500 winner Hugo Olsen rolls off in 17th position alongside him, former world champion for Yas Heath. Andrew Roos alongside Nathan Lewis for BS Competition on the edge of the top 20 with Alexis Newsom inside of Severi Seppa. Riley Thompson for Total Downforce Racing inside of the Brazilian Rafael Aquesta on row number 12 with Michael Overbay alongside Diogo C. Pinto. Graham Carroll for Red Bull Racing Esports alongside Jake Matheson with Dylan Freckleton. Always a strong competitor here, despite being an independent driver alongside McLaren Esports of the top 30. 3 final cars. Edu Morales, Brian Beard, and Alessandro Pico. The gap between the top 33 cars here, Justin, 4 hundredths of a second.
And that just shows some of the preparation put in by these drivers to be able to put in that speed and how close qualifying can be with these types of cars. But first coming over from the stock cars from the NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, you have some of the best open wheel drivers in all of iRacing. And you have some of the drivers who have been competing throughout, had more victories. It's going to be an interesting race to say the very least.
No 3-wide traditional start. That's something that you have to wait until the month of November. TV, as always, will present coverage of the 3rd annual Open Wheels 500. It was Hugo Olsen winning that last year. It was his teammate now, Wilson Neto, lining up 2x2 all the way through the 33 cars. A couple of corners still left to go before we get underway. Sommel, let's get a quick prediction from you here. Kraus is starting us.
I think I can't look beyond Neto as well. Neto in P3 is going to be very, very interesting, but that battle is not just restricted to all the cars you see in the top 5. Back there are some very potent drivers, including last year's winner, Jason Brophy.
And the cars in the real world direction on this main straightaway in the Indy GP. Just a couple of weeks away from the real world Indy 500 kicking off. Let's kick off the month of May, though, here on the iRacing service as a second away with Philip Kraus leading us down in towards turn number 1. Straightaway they work. It's side by side between Soria and Kraus for the race lead. Switch around in through turn 3, Justin. That might be the story of the opening couple of laps.
Force and the amount of drafting power these drivers can have. We're expecting a lot of back and forth when it comes to that, especially for drivers wanting to try and not just fight for the race lead, in terms of trying to save a bit of gas, especially early on in this race. In the mid-pack, trying to scrap around and try and get themselves in position to be able to do the swap arounds.
Hugo Olsen has a good view of almost 3 wide in through turn 2. I believe that's Jason Brophy side by side with Yao Romanov, lap 2 out of 200. They're 3 wide down this back straightaway, Sommel. I don't think this is necessarily what we expected.
Right at the very top of the race, which is interesting because this is going to be more of a long one. But let's see what they're doing right now. Right now, the intention seems to be clear, and there's a car on the pit road.
That's Zeke Willis, maybe a black flag for jumping the start. Oh, careful twitch there as he gets down onto pit road speed. Top 4 cars starting to get themselves single-filed at the front of your field. They are still... What we were talking about before we came on air, Justin, was usually when you come to Indy, what we'll see next week in the Open Setup 500, you take off as much of the downforce as you feel for dear life. Here it's slightly different today. A little bit more downforce. It does mean I think those in-car tools are going to be crucial to managing the balance of the car over the run. It does also mean it's more difficult, I think, to get passes done.
Absolutely. These drivers, without the draft, were running earlier today in one of the earlier morning splits at speeds of 220 plus miles an hour. But in the corners, 217. Not much difference in terms of the speed can come in. And so the draft for some of the drivers, but the difficult part is also going to be Arjuna. The aero wash in the corners is still going to be a major factor to set up some of the passes. So we'll force drivers to lift up and see with Walsh, for example, going through 5th gear and down to 4th gear to be able to get that little extra boost of speed in some of these corners to make sure you can be able to rotate and be exit. So it's going to be a balancing act along the race today on where the runs come from, as well as though dealing with some of the aero washers you drive your way around this racetrack.
Oh, and then Trost up into the outside wall, and indeed, there we go, working lap 5 in this 200-lap affair, and it's the 24 car. That might become the first. Has had something happen to him as well with Michael Romandis. We will get the RaceSpotTV replay up on the screen as soon as we can. But Sommel, we was talking about elbows down on pit road.
It seems like it's not elbows out, it feels like speed racing all over again, where they've got their rim spikes out. That is a bit crazy to see the caution out right now on the 5th lap of the race, because early on in a few races back there, a few years down the line, we saw this happening later. Drivers were more sophisticated about the added downforce on the cars, but no, seemingly the bubble has burst.
The cars will form themselves up behind the pace car driver, now nicknamed along with the ISOWC a couple of weeks ago. Now has a name there, you can see in the iRacing sedan as well. Brand new car that I'm sure we can name here today. So top Walsh, Malechka 4th and 5th. The only change has been for the race lead in that top 5. Ooh, it's Romandis who maybe slides up the track into the path of Trost. I think Jesper Orman then would know where to go.
Tough break for Trost, who was the winner in the 9 a.m. top split for tonight's action, in part on strategy, able to stretch to 31 laps on fuel. He and several others now with broken axles as a result to start. Some of the heavy hitters as a result already having to get significant damage repairs. Seen Vaz as well among the drivers who are currently dragging their tires around the racetrack. So this is going to really affect some of the big heavy hitters in terms of
Don't necessarily think Soria is actually going to come down onto pit road. There he go, fakes out at the very last second. It's early. I mean, 30-lap fuel window. You don't want to give up the track position just yet, Sommel.
Exactly. Does not make sense to go to a pit stop right across the line when we come to say lap 27, lap 28. And if we do see a caution coming out again, maybe we might see a few drivers in double minds at that stage. Right now, it's all... And Arjuna, I know it's a bit early to say this phrase, but it happens every so often in oval racing. Cautions eventually do breed more cautions.
Knocking on all the wood around us to hope that that doesn't come to fruition, because it might be a rather long 200-lap affair then. And starting with 33 cars, I think on track, because Romandis and pit road, a very busy places. Cars like Yao Vaz, who Justin had mentioned, had some damage to attend to as well. They'll see if they can get whatever penalty, top speed reduction that they've gotten here early in this race fixed. Vaz was very impressive in the opening round of the ISOWC, and the one thing that I really heard from him, Justin, that got me excited was he was talking about how good this Indy car feels on the new tire model. We see the new damage model in effect when, cars come together and debris goes scampering, but it's much harder to see what the new tire model does. A former World Championship competitor back in the open wheel days, Vaz has said he's having as much fun as he had on the iRacing service for the last couple of years.
Yeah, the racing has been very interesting, especially when it comes to on the new tire model for these respective cars. Fall off is not expected to be too major here, but it also brings a lot of potential flexibility for some of the drivers to be able to run various lines, and just trying to manage the tire temperatures is something that's always now been one of the main focal points, Arjuna, with this respective tire. So you can't necessarily push full out, because you do that, you likely bake your tires and you end up having to lift off the gas later on the run more than everyone else, and you lose a lot of time. So it's sort of like that balancing act again on trying to manage the tires now, compared to in the past where you can push a lot. Now you have to make sure you manage the tires to be able to push.
Can see Vaz, I think, might be done for the day. That right front is missing completely, Sommel, and repair time keeps on adding, almost 2 minutes and ticking for the 32.
Yeah, it seems highly unlikely now that there's a good chance for the 32 to bounce back and do something in the long run in this race, because they will of course be many laps down. So for Vaz, it's a bit of a tricky situation. Once the car recovers, do you go out there, do you finish the race, or do you just back out? It's a case of what they think mentally. In the long run, but it may just make sense to drive around, have a fun Saturday morning here, and have some good time with some of the best racers around. But it may not make any sense to be lapped around all the time. So it depends on what they want to choose eventually for Vaz.
And apologies, by the way, for any technical issues. They should all be sorted out now, and the remaining 190 so laps or so should be completely interruption-free. So first caution on the day. We'll be hoping that this does not begin a bit of a trend like Sommel was mentioning. The lights are off on the pace car, so top 5 still Soria, Kraus, Nato, Walsh, and Malechka. Franzoni up 4 positions into 6th. Curran up 5 with Jason Brophy 8 positions gained and counting as he tries to work his way into the top 5. Biggest mover as you go back to Alessandro Bico starting towards the very tail of the field. He's up now into 17th. 16 positions gained for him. I believe he was competing in the IndyCar back at the Cup of Nations, the sim racers version that we had. We won't talk about the race that happened here at the end of day number 1. Went on for a number of laps because caution laps did not count, but we are ready to get back to the green flag action. It's Soria pulling away very slightly at the start. We'll wait and see how long it takes them to form up double file as well, because I am expecting, Justin, a track position to be very important on these race restarts.
I was expecting the same thing for it today, because with the air wash it can make things fairly tricky to try and make a pass in a lot of these groupings. It takes a lot of strategy for things to come out, but just as I say that, within half a lap as the answer, Kraus quickly got the draft and took advantage of Soria to be able to take that pass in quick.
So swap once more for the race lead, but for 10th on back, it's Villegas who's starting to cause a bit of a check-up here with Hugo Olsen now looking to the outside to try and get around up into the 10th position. And you can see there is lots of clear air in between Olsen and Jason Brophy in front. 0.7 of a second as they come across the start-finish line. Romanov's going to be looking in his rear-view mirrors as a swarm of hungry cars, Sommel, begins to form behind him.
I think they're realizing at this stage the track position is going to be so critical, and they want to make their moves when everyone is all bunched up together. That is why you see the aggression that's happening right now. And Justin made an excellent point. Beyond the point, air wash is going to trouble you. And it's not just going to trouble you in terms of making a move, but also on your tyres, Arjuna.
And tyres, with track temperatures being such an important factor coming into this race. We didn't really talk about it, but I think it was 133 Fahrenheit, or if you are a metric person like me, 56 degrees Celsius. Tyres will be screaming in agony. There's Severi Seppa checked up behind Jake Matheson in the 4. This is on the edge of the top 15. And Justin, one of our eNASCAR Coca-Cola drivers there in Jake Matheson.
Yes, indeed, and one of 3 has talked about Casey Kerwin, Ryan Doucette also involved in today's race. These drivers love to race these types of oval competitions, so it's not a surprise to see them out of the racetrack today. But so far, give a shout out to Kerwin, up those 5 positions so far, the highest running of the stock car racers from the eNASCAR side, and continuing to pick up pace. In fact, he's picking up the draft of 6th position and closing in by a couple tenths a lap.
He was taking part in last night's race, so 4 different time slots for drivers globally to compete in this fixed 500. It'll be the same case the next weekend for the Open 500 as well. This time slot is our broadcasted slot, so 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, excuse me. You can catch the iRacing Open 500, the 12th annual running of that one. Brandon Traino looks for his 3rd back-to-back victory in a row, and the incredible thing, he's the only driver to have won it multiple times as well. The gap out front is starting to compress on down. Kraus only 1/10 clear of Soria in 2nd, and you can see the 255 he's got ridden on his car well and truly in the draft, running up a line as well, Sommel, just trying to hang on to the tires.
Exactly, that is going to be the smarter thing to do when you consider that this race is not a 50-lap sprint, it's a 200-lap endurance race, and it's something that Will Winston of RaceSpotTV, who doesn't quite commentate very often now, but is a mainstay of all the IndyCar races here on RaceSpot. He often says it's the fastest endurance racing race in the world. It may just seem like turning left, but beyond the point, it lasts so long mentally, physically, for the tyres as well. You have to endure it beyond the point. And then, that is where strategy, that is where mindful driving like this one really comes into perspective.
Will Vincent taking a much-needed break from all the chaos that's been not just 2020, but also 2021. And so many different things going on here at RaceSpotTV. Take a look from the rearward shot from your race leader, Philip Kraus in the purple and silver for Team Talent. You can see there's some ducking and diving further back. I believe that's Franzoni now trying to get to the inside of Robert Malechka, race winner in the Lionheart Speedway Series just a couple of weeks ago. And in terms of that Lionheart Series, I'm going to come back to you here, Justin, for just a few moments. It's not just Malechka that I've got my eye on. We've got Alexis Newsom, the only multiple-time winner in the Speedway Series this season so far, now joined up with the Triple Crown Racing Team and Indy Alliance Group, running in 14th. If this is a strategy battle come the end of this race, you and I know who we're looking out for.
Yeah, Newsom is really good when it comes to saving gas and figuring out the strategies. One of the wins in the Speedway Series that came in Texas Motor Speedway in particular came in what was a fuel mileage race, and Newsom was able to stretch the gas to get to the checker flag. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Alexis Newsom be one of the drivers who's trying to save a little bit right now, stretch out that gap a little bit more in terms of lap totals, and think about that big picture. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out to the race. Keep in mind, though, that there were several drivers who did top off for an extra couple laps just in case, because in that Speedway Series, caution flags have come out to play in strategies during the pit window. Riley Thompson is the first driver who topped off on fuel in 17th.
And he's about to lose control of the car coming through turn 2. Damage done to the front end. Will this bring out the caution, though? Because he's parked down on the pit exit. I think we will stay under green flag conditions. Thompson was on a charge of a lifetime. I've been watching him carve his way up through the field using both the inside and the outside. And we'll take a look at the RaceSpotTV replay in just a moment's time. I believe, Sommer, what happened there might have been a little bit too much weight jacker, using the dirty air to wash up into the outside wall, and from there, well, it was disaster waiting to happen.
Exactly. When you hit that wall, there is literally nothing you can do to control the car, and it is so lucky that he did not hit anyone and did not rebound back on the racing line. So that's good for everyone, but for him, seriously, what do you do now? It's still green flag racing. You have lost a ton of time. Composure here is going to be essential.
And so he's cycled now to the tail end of the field, 29th. The final car still running. 3 seconds adrift from Brandon Trost, who is back out there and circulating. So don't never say never if you're Riley Thompson, but is going to be a long 400-plus miles to get him now to the end of this race. Very impressed, by the way, by Jose Soria here, who's tucked up in the draft, right behind Philip Kraus, an experienced competitor in the IndyCar. And guess who he's got behind him? The Brazilian Wilson Nato, who joined up with Powerslide Motorsports just a couple of months ago. He's always been strong when he runs by himself. Now, though, he's got a team behind him as well. His teammate Hugo Olsen has some work to do to catch up with Nato up in the top 3, but it could be looking like Powerslide Motorsports make the month of May here in 2021 their first, where they get a victory in the broadcast as well. And the great thing about these Indy 500 Sommels is Daytona 24, let's be completely honest, I'm going to speak my mind here. We only really care about who won the main broadcast slot. Yes, there's another time slot, mainly used by people in a certain geographical region down under. Here, though, for the Indy 500, there are 4 different time slots, and I tell you what, you ask the Indy community, they know who won that 4th time slot back in, I'll give you a random year, 2014. They'll also know who won the 1st time slot back in 2012, for example. There is so much history that you can go and read a wonderful, it's 150-page odd media guide written by Tanner Watkins of OaklandWheels.com, detailing the history of the iRacing Indy 500.
Now that you have to send to me, Arjuna, that would be a lovely read. But yes, if there's one thing I've learned from my time here, it's the IndyCar community in iRacing is really, really well knit. They know everything, they watch every single race, and it's glad to see everyone coming out here in support, like everyone would, for instance, for a real-life Indy 500 as well. So lovely to see stuff like that, and that's the best part, right? It's an open community, it's an engaged one, so you often see new people joining in and challenging the ranks too. Eventually, someone makes it to the broadcasted split, and then that's where the fun begins. To see yourself out there, to prove to your sponsors that you can make it as well, to prove to your team members, must be a special feeling being on this one.
We are on board with Bono Cuis. For those who don't know, I said McLaren. He's no longer part of the McLaren Shadow program, a Team Redline driver, and also for Mercedes AMG. So I want to know some of the accolades that Bono has. The Formula E Visa Vegas E-Race winner, 5-time Formula Sim Racing champion. He's also competed in the F1 Esports Series as well. But for those who don't know Justin, Bono, as well as Graham Carroll, who is running for the Red Bull Racing Esports team further up the grid here today, they both love a good Indy fixed race, so it's not a total surprise to see them out on track here today.
Yeah, a lot of different drivers from the road course race community also love to race these types of events because they allow the opportunity to show the test of skills of not just who's the quickest on the racetrack, but who's the best in terms of adapting to how the setup may run at a specific track. And for a lot of competitors, they love this type of scenario as a result, and it's been very competitive, to say the very least, to see some of these drivers want to try and get involved in open wheel racing and want to continue to grow their skill sets in said racing. Drivers like Carroll are among that group, absolutely, who can show great speed in these types of cars. Carroll, by the way, up 9 positions so far in this race, Arjuna, among the drivers who topped off on fuel after the first caution flag.
Just reading some of the chat in our YouTube here, by the way, getting questions as Grosjean here, is Jimmy Broadbent in the split? Well, Jimmy's not, I can tell you that. Romain Grosjean has other things to focus on. His first IndyCar pole position yesterday, and what a day that was, Sommel. I mean, it was hard not to get a bit emotional about what a transformation has gone. 6 months ago, that, incredible accident, I think the entire world just came to a standstill as we processed that news. And then pole position yesterday, setting a marker. The first time at a road course that I think he was truly feel comfortable, having raced there before, and he really showed just how quick he can be.
All I can say is I'm not surprised at all. All this talent in Romain Grosjean was just being suppressed all over the years. Driving a car like the Haas, but finally in a series like IndyCar where there's, let's say, in relation a lot more parity, it's good to see him going out there and proving exactly what he's made of. Only 3 races in, Arjuna. How insane is that?
And the best part was we saw one of his young esports drivers for the R8G team, Przemysław Lemonek, join us on a Monday night on our IndyCar coverages. There's a swap, I believe, for 4th as Malechki gets on pass. Ocean Walsh, who loses the rear end of the car coming through the short chute. Yellow flag is out for the 2nd time today. And from a top 5 finish, Dave Walsh will drop down to the edge of the top 20 all by himself, Justin. The car stepped around by magic.
Wondering if that's Wade Jacker right there with how quickly that car just went around, just ran the normal line right around the bottom of the racetrack, and around to win the number 3 machine all the way to the bottom of the racetrack. Great job to keep it off the wall, have to say. Prevent any damage, but this is going to make strategy very more so important here. You can see very close to getting hit with the right side pod in the spin.
That was Franzoni, I do believe, who might have had his heart in his mouth. Curran was right on the tail end there as well, so Franzoni didn't really have much time to check up. Walsh drops out then of the top 5. He will cycle back into 15th, so net 10 positions lost. Lap 25 out of 200 though, Sommel. Will we see cars down onto pit road this time around?
I doubt, because usually the pit window would be, say, somewhere around 30, 32 odd laps around here, but 25 is a bit too early. 25 is a bit too early to take a gamble like that, and I think there might be a couple of people who might be saying, okay, on an average it's taken what, some 20 odd laps this time of good green flag running until we've seen the caution. There will be some drivers banking on a gamble, at least some should ideally, but I think mostly on the most part drivers will play it safe and, oh, there we go, I've been proven wrong.
I think you're right in that window where everyone except maybe some of those who came down in that first caution will come down onto pit road, full tank of fuel, and fresh set of rubber as well. No tire limits in today's race, so as expected, potentially, pit road, an extremely busy place. Can't afford to make a mistake getting into your box here. It's very easy to lock your brakes up, slide in through your stall. Not the money stop by any means, but you don't want to shuffle yourselves back early in the running. Cars up on the jacks. Can Kraus win the race off of pit road? Brophy in front of Olsen. It will be Kraus, it will be Soria, and I believe Nato just in front of Malechka, who almost makes his way up into the podium positions. Very busy pit lane then, Justin, as we have our 2nd caution on the day.
You know, the biggest loser in all of that is going to be, I believe, Ryan Doucette, because he was running top 10, but he was among the drivers, Arjuna, who elected to pit during the first caution flag, expecting to get a long run, be able to stretch it forward, work the race backwards, have to pit with, and have to take less fuel later on in the race. Now, he's back in 22nd position, a minus 11 overall on the race, so he's now going to be stuck towards the back. The bright side is he has a technical alliance member right in front of him in Matheson to work with to try and cut through the traffic, so there is that communication that can come into play. Keep in mind, Matheson and Doucette work together in the back end of things for eNASCAR competition.
And, well, Ocean Walsh has just jumped into the iRacing IndyCar community Discord, and, well, 3 words. Well, that's embarrassing. And, well, Don't worry, Ocean, it happens to the best of us sometimes, and you just got caught out. And we'll take a look at the onboard here from Franzoni. So the RaceSpotTV replay, you can see the rear end steps around. Franzoni looks to the inside for a moment and just gets lucky there to not follow that car down to the inside.
I got very lucky, to say the very least, at that moment, Arjuna, to be able to keep out of trouble and just that close from getting wing damage that could cost him a lot of track position early on.
And so, ticking away the laps then, onto lap 27 out of 200. Nice little green flag run there, but I think the most important storyline, Sommel, is the fact that for the race lead, there was the pass down into turn 3, coming back to green flag action. And after that, well, Soria has been very content to ride around in Kraus's draft.
And maybe that's the smart thing to do. He's maintaining that sort of gap where he's not having too much of aero wash, but is still able to get that crucial draft in so that it doesn't fall back behind. So I think Soria in the long run is playing the smarter game. But then again, we've seen it happen towards the very end where drivers have been sitting in P2 and P3, and in the final laps of the race, that's it. That's where they pull out there, and that's when they get the big win. It's happened time and again in real life and also on the iRacing service. I wonder whether Soria is trying to plan something like that here today.
And Ocean Walsh just giving a bit more of an update. He might have actually hit the wall coming out of turn 2 on that same lap to get some right front damage. And maybe not even in-car tools. Maybe that car always set for some kind of calamity. Top 5, Kraus, Soria, Nato, Malechka, and Franzoni. The top 3 where they started. Malechka up 1 on the day with Franzoni up 5. Jason Brophy sniffing a top 5. 10 positions gained on the day so far. Biggest mover still is Alessandro Bico, but been unable to make any sort of moves since that last time we talked about him. He is in 14th position for the Williams Esports team. So the pace car back down onto the safety of pit road. Look at that. Oh, our producer Hugo Luis is showing off as there comes the green flag into the hand of Barney the flagman. RaceSpot's own flagman will be up there in the real booth. Aaron Liking's flagging this weekend at the Indy GP, but it's Barney right now with the green flag in his hand. A bit of an untidy start, as you can see cars coming down to the inside, but let's get back underway. Kraus, Soria, and Nato across the start-finish line, and there you can see it's Severi Seppa too wide. I think that's with Andrew Roos, excuse me. Not sure, Justin, if we might see some more penalties coming down for that.
Oh, a big crash in turn 1 and 2, though. Pinto spun it around and collected Doucette and several others.
Caution then very quickly back out. There you can see Doucette, and it's the 21 of Diogo C. Pinto involved, and Brian Beard gets mixed up as well in the 29 car. Quick spin around there for Doucette. Clearly still significant damage there, unfortunately for him. Pinto and Beard straight down onto pit road then, Sommel.
Exactly. They had to. No other choice in a situation like this one. Now we're more close to the fuel window right there. But then, again, we come back to the same point. Cautions breed cautions. Everyone is just bunched up together. And that is where you do see accidents like this one. Already, we're going at an alarming rate in comparison to what we saw last year. I wonder how many cautions we'll end up with eventually, Arjuna.
So back under caution, take a look at this replay though. Aerial angle brought to us by ATVO, and a car of, not Doucette, excuse me, that's Bico's car just snaps by itself, and Doucette comes across the scene of the accident with not much time to respond. I wonder if that rear wing is going to be fixable. That right rear, unlikely to be fixable though. I tell you what, now that we're back under caution for the 3rd time today, let's bring in Brandon Traino, the 2-time iRacing Indy 500 winner, the only multi-time winner, looking to make it 3 in a row in just a week's time. Brandon, delighted to have you here in the commentary booth. First up, how are you doing watching from the sidelines?
We're doing pretty good. This race has been pretty interesting to watch. A lot more cautions than I think than I thought there would be, to be honest. But no, it's been good. We're trying to hopefully learn a couple of things watching this race. I know fixed racing is a little bit different than open racing, but I think there's a couple of things that we could apply to the race next weekend here.
I think the major thing that you're going to be watching here is strategy and the effect of the increased track temperature, because it was very much a talking point from all the competitors coming into this one, especially with qualifying always being so difficult. 133 degrees track temperature. Tell us about how that affects the car, especially in comparison to last year.
Yeah, it's been a challenge. I know for us, we've had to redo the setup quite a bit and back off the aggressiveness of the cambers and the crossweight, things like that. So our Q set we've had to back off, and it's been a struggle trying to get that fourth lap down because you just run that car so on the edge that the fourth lap is almost just like a hold on and pray kind of thing. So yeah, we'll see.
And for those who maybe don't understand the challenge of Indy 500 qualifying, I was having a conversation with one of your Apex Racing teammates, Zach Campbell, a World Championship driver, and he put it to me this way, Brandon. Indy 500 qualifying is the toughest thing you can do on the iRacing service. 16 corners that you have to nail the turn-in point to. You have to have confidence in your car as well, know how to manage the in-car tools, and ultimately, the week that you've got ahead of you is one of the most stressful across of all 52 weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the toughest qualifying sessions out there. It's not easy, and like I said, we run these cars so on edge to find all the speed we can, and throughout testing, you're looking for thousands over 4 laps, which is mind-boggling when you think about it. And the top 33 guys will probably be separated by probably less than a tenth. I forget what the separation was last year, but it always comes down to the last couple sessions on Friday, and there's always guys who just sit there and grind during the week trying to find everything they can just to make the show. So it's going to be interesting for sure this year.
How are you feeling, Brandon? I mean, you're the only multi-time winner. We've talked about it, earlier this year. There is some pressure, but I think also a lack of pressure being in the position where you are, where if you win again, it's history that it's going to take a long time for someone to come and match. Well,
you keep saying that, and I think you're the one that's putting the pressure on me. But no, it's the guys at I5G and Apex Racing we've been grinding a lot, and we've focused more on the race set this year. Where usually we kind of put a little more emphasis on qualifying. We just think that the race is going to play out so much different this year with the track temp. And then the draft model is a little bit different than last year. It's a little harder to pass. It's a little more harder to follow. So we've put a lot of emphasis in trying to get the car better in the draft, and hopefully it pays off this year.
Thanks for jumping in, Brandon. No pressure from my side. I just think that if you do this, it's going to be a marker that you set down, and no one's going to be able to match for at least another decade to come. Excited about the race next weekend, and hopefully it goes all well.
Yeah, we're excited. I'm excited. I've put in a lot of work this year. I think I've actually put in more hours and laps than I did last year. So hopefully it all pays off come next weekend.
Thanks for joining us then, Brandon, and we'll be looking forward to watching you in action in just a week's time. 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. A week from today, you can join us for coverage of the 12th annual iRacing Indy 500. The same day as Indy 500 qualifying, which does mean for the Powerslide Motorsports team, Adam Blocker will not be racing. Instead, they've got the likes of Wilson Nadeau and Hugo Olsen to challenge I5G and the Apex Racing team. Third portion then comes to an end here as Kraus picks up the throttle. We get back to the green flag action, and once more we'll wait and see who gets the best of the launches. I think it was Casey Kerwin, the exit number 1 machine, all over the rear end of Franzoni heading in towards turn number 1. He's looking for the outside, Justin, to get on past.
Yeah, got a great restart there that time, and right now just trying to utilize the clean air and get a bit of a run off the corner. And this is one of the main focal points to be able to make passes, but a bit of a bobble, a bit of a weave now, trying to come from Franzoni to try and defend, holds up Kerwin as they swap for the race lead.
Malechka using that draft to, I think, defend for Kerwin for now, but Kerwin, bold move down the inside of turn 3 as there you see Soria now back into the race lead. Swap around there, so maybe drafting now will come into the mind of Philip Kraus and fuel saving as lap 32 is in the books. 3 cautions done. And our first pit stops as well for all of the drivers under their belts. They're single file at the front of your field. There's Severi Seppa coming down onto pit road. Not sure, Sommel, if there's damage or if that's a penalty.
Indeed, yeah, a bit of confusion about what's going on in that particular case. We shall get more information on that right now. But again, Arjuna, many drivers prioritizing track position, many of them going on the aggressive, including Jose Soria. So now I think that's what the third change for the lead that we've seen already, and it's only being a 2-horse race right now.
Romanov in the 17 car has his front wheel dangling dangerously as he's slowly trundling his way down the back straightaway. I think we've had another issue coming through turn 2 at the short chute, you can see. Wheel tethers very effective there, has not yet been sent for a toss. Seppa off of pit road, 30 seconds stationary, and does indicate some sort of penalty for maybe passing slightly earlier. Good news about Romanov though, Justin, is because he kept it down on the inside, no caution back out, and Kraus right on the tail of the race leader.
And that was from contact with Freckleton, by the way. That sent him up into the wall and busted that right front on the 17 machine. And already has lost a lap that's going to lose him a ton of time. You'll see right here, car underneath them pushes up the racetrack. Romanov pushed into the wall as a result of the contact with the side pod. Great job to keep it up on the top line, out of the racing groove. Make sure he doesn't collect any other competitors. But up towards the front, things are getting a little bit more dicier now, especially with Kerwin being one of the quickest cars. The racetrack was 2/10 quicker than the race leader last time by. He has been lightning quick even in the dirty air.
And I think Malechka sees him in the rearview mirror, is trying to find some alternate lines because he knows if he doesn't get past NATO shortly, Kerwin's going to be doing it soon as well. Kerwin looks to the inside then as we ride on board with the XF driver. Had a very fun race last night, which I was following along with on Twitch. The entire IndyCar community seemingly showing up in his Twitch chat as well, cheering him on in a dramatic finish there. What will we see? But still a long way to go in this race. Only one green flag stop would have been done if we had avoided those caution periods. There is still lots of opportunity for drivers to cycle their way to the front of the field. But once more, Sommel, they are single-filed themselves out throughout the entire field.
Interesting, yeah. But what's even more interesting is that Malechka is constantly taking an outside line, as you can see right now, constantly going out there in a bit to save his tyres, because of course if he does become a part of the aero wash, his tyres will be worn down a little bit more. And the best part is, he's not losing time, Arjuna. Eventually, you do expect to go to the outside line and lose a little bit of time, but he's keeping on that same draft and the same time difference consistently to the guys at the front and to the guys at the back as well. So that is a strategy that's working out quite well for Malechka right now and may pay dividends in the long run.
So out of our 33 starters, down to 23 cars on the lead lap, with Severi Seppa, the 24th and final runner, one lap down on the field. Retirements include Yao Romanov, Ocean Walsh, Diogo C. Pinto, Brian Beard, Ryan Doucette, Yao Vaz, Michael Romandis, Jesper Orman, and Zeke Willis. Lots of names there. I do believe at least 2, if not 3, Williams eSports drivers. As we complete lap 37, Malechka still very much committed to the outside line, and he's building up a whole heap of momentum here, Justin.
Now continuing to just try and utilize some of the clean air and build up a bit of a run off the corner. It's not easy to pass once you get a few laps in, as we've seen though throughout this entire race. As Samuel had talked about a little bit, helps save the tires a little bit, but also is in the matter of just trying to build up some sort of speed without having to deal with the air wash that'll push him up the racetrack and potentially push him back towards Kerwin in his position. So it can take several laps to try and set up this pass if he ends up wanting to go that route. Right now he's just thinking big picture here, as well as just trying to get that clean air to get some more rotation off the nose and use a bit, that slight bit of banking as a bit of a ramp off the corner.
And you can see from the rearward shot of Malechka, the 3 cars behind him all finding pockets of clean air. Jason Brophy, he's up 9 positions on the day, wants to get up into that top 5, but tucked up behind Franzoni right now as we jump on board with the private label Team Hype driver. He had a bit of a difficult race last time the Lionheart IndyCar Series was in action, but he'll be hoping that this time, in just a couple of days, round 7 coverage comes this Wednesday. The private label Team Hype machine can continue their charge at the top of the team standings. Joshua Chin and Connor Harrington, the other 2 drivers that have been oh so strong and impervious to seemingly some chaos this season. On lap 40 of this race, Brophy wants a top 5 finish. And for some of these drivers, Sommel, I mean, a fixed 500. Traino said it as well. They are using this as data gathering. Brophy wants to win today, but he's even more focused on taking the victory 1 week from today.
That is exactly what we saw last year as well when the fixed set of Indy 500 was first introduced. It's a bit like a dress rehearsal, this one, where you practice, where you get some track conditions, where you get a realistic idea of where you stand on a normal basis in comparison to all the others. It's good to sharpen up your race skill, but the real difference in ovals can actually be the setup, and that is what we're going to see next week. But for now, it's good testing, it's good trying out, it's good to build yourself up to try and make sure that you're good in terms of the racecraft.
And just taking a look at the YouTube chat, lots of comments going on as RaceSpot's own Lewis McClade jumps into the chat as well. Great to see Lulu in. He was commentating on the ISOWC just a week ago. Brophy slightly loose off of turn 4. Maybe a bit too much weight jacker in that car, heating up the right rear tire. He looks to try and get past as we jump on board with a wonderful gyro cam here, Justin, but not able to get the move done.
Yeah, he's took in a few different looks at this moment, just can't get it done completely, and that's one of the main things I've noticed is even when you get the side-by-side run, that draft is huge to try and work your way back forward if you get that slipstream from some of the drivers in front down the straightaway, and that's one of the tough things is you have to cut your way from out of that draft to be able to make some of those moves here on Arjuna if you want to be able to make that pass on by.
I think something's just happened to Rafael Acesta because he jumped to the top of the timing screen, usually an indication he's down on pit road. Brophy has to defend though to the inside. Here comes a Swede, Hugo Olsen, the young driver from Stockholm. He announced himself to the community, winning in November last year. It was a 3-horse race between him and his Powerslide teammate Adam Blocker and Michele Costantini until a late race pit stop where Costantini made a bit of a hash of things, as sometimes does happen here at the Brickyard. Left it 2-horse race between the two Powerslide drivers. It was the Swede that took victory, and he wants to win here today. The major thing that I think he's got on his mind, we were having a bit of discussion as a Powerslide unit before we came into this race, Sommel. You are someone experienced with balancing the requirements of schooling and trying to race as well as we jump on board with the replay for Acesta coming down onto turn 4. Just into the wall and just about avoids the attenuator as well. But day done, I would assume, for the 27. Going back to Olsen, next week, the Open 500, that is the marker on his mind. However, Sommel, the problem is he's got a 7-hour exam before the race actually happens.
Wait a minute, 7 hours?
Yes.
What kind of exam is that long? Hey, it happens though, but goodness me. Again, it's a case of balancing your time, and you have to prioritize, you have to understand your commitments, and it's a thing with sim racing, right? It often draws you in so much. It becomes your first priority because you're so passionate about it, but as with so many people racing it, they know how to build that balance in. And even if it is an examination, for some people it's their day job. It's lovely to see how so many members, Arjuna, hundreds and thousands of them on iRacing, actually are able to balance it out so well. Some better than the others, but it's good to see that passion coming in and sim racing actually becoming a big priority for so many of them.
Sim racing is great, and we were mentioning Romain Grosjean before. I'm taking a look now at my timing screen for the real-life race that is happening right now. If you are watching this iRacing Fixed 500, thank you for tuning in and not turning your attention to trackside activities at the real Brickyard. They are driving the wrong way down that main straightaway. They'll turn it around in the next coming days and focus in on the Indy 500. Olsen all the way down to the inside as he closes in on Brophy. He is an incredible 9 positions gained as well on the day. Strategy has very much cycled through some of those cars to the front. Talking about the battle out front, well, it's 0.2 of a second between Soria and Kraus, with Nato half a second back in third. Milechka still all over the rear wing of that third place car, Justin.
He's been trying to build up a run for about 70+ laps at least now. It's just been very difficult once more because it seems at the very least that the cars get very tight, a bit understeering, if I lack for a better term, within the tire-to-tire lineup. And right now Milechka is sacrificing, yes, the time to be able to close up in the apex, but again, helps keep the tires cool by staying out of the aero wash and trying something different, because you need to try something different if you want to try and make a move. Trying the same thing over and over and over again will not, in some cases, lead to results, potentially, Arjuna.
And we briefly mentioned it at the start of the race. I mean, when we came here 12 months ago, it was a much different sort of a challenge. You had a fixed setup, but no in-car tools. It made for a very difficult race where you had to use only your 2 hands and your 2 feet to get the most out of the car. Taking a look from the right side of the cockpit on board with Malechka, you will see on the steering wheel there's a number of dials and things on the screen that indicate to the driver various positioning. So you'll notice first on the left-hand side, those will be 2 red boxes. Those are the front and rear ARBs. They show a 0 for us because we're not allowed to see the secrets of what Malechka has figured out. That third number is the weight jacker. It allows the driver to slide some weight up and down the cross-axis of the car. It will also mean potentially you get your car very understeering or very oversteering. Now, the fourth number, that might be the most important. Fuel maps are actually a thing here on the Dallara IR18. So if you are Robert Malechka here, Sommel, you might bump this car down into fuel map 2, maybe into fuel map 3. You no longer have to lift off the throttle like you were doing before. You will still, though, get the benefit of fuel saving.
That's right. It's a lot more different. It's a lot more sophisticated to a lot more other oval racing series. I'm sorry. And it's good to see that. And the interesting part is, it's good to see those sort of changes coming into the fixed Indy 500 as well. Because last year, I remember many people calling it just a gimmick, right? What is oval racing if you don't have changes like this one? Because then it just becomes quite literally only turning left. Good to see these changes coming in right now and drivers having to work quite harder. What it does is kind of increase the disparity between the top drivers who put in hours and hours of effort and between normal amateurs. But then again, some might say it's only for the better, right? Because otherwise then there's a good chance that you might see some unprofessional racing happening in some really top splits. But a word on this approach of going outside that Malechka is following constantly, I think it's only really possible in this part of the race. Because we're still early on, because we don't have marbles accumulating outside, it is still very much doable. Later on in the race, there might be some time lost for Malechka if he does something quite like this one.
So officially 50 laps complete, so 25% race distance done. 33 starters whittled down to just 22 cars on the lead lap. Equal driver, equal chances, but one shot to write yourself into the history books. It was Sage Karam 12 months ago taking victory. It won't be a real-life driver this time around. It's all about sim racing's finest, and you've got Jose Soria, a relatively new driver to the IndyCar, but a very strong competitor over the years on the iRacing service, being chased down by Philip Kraus, a man with experience racing IndyCars on multiple simulators, and Wilson Nato, always quick here at the Brickyard. Second place starter in both of the Open Wheels 500s. It gives you an indication of what he can do when he's all by himself, and now he's got a team behind him as well. Excited to see his prospects heading into this next week of qualifying. For those of you watching that are interested in competing in the Open Setup 500 but maybe don't have the setup knowledge, well, it's a good thing the IndyCar community has you covered in terms of setup shops and resources to get yourself started. You've got the likes of the big name, VRS, PDS, Majors Garage, etc., etc., etc. But all represented by the 3 big teams, Apex Racing Team, Powerslide Motorsports, and Team Talent. And they should have some good setups to get you started on your journey, with qualifying beginning this coming Monday evening as the iRacing week switches over. And this coming Monday as well, we'll have coverage from the Atlanta Motor Speedway on a Monday night for the IndyCar iRacing Open Championship. Not sure how populated that's going to be though, Justin, because I think for all of these teams and drivers, they know what's more important.
Absolutely, and for many different organizations, the prestige and the credibility and the success that comes with winning an Open Indy 500 as well as a fixed Indy 500 at that moment is so huge when it comes to being able to build your career on the sim and being able to build your reputation. It's something that takes hours upon hours of work for both the fixed and the open side to know the adjustments you make, to know what setups do what, to be able to test various different things out, to get that seat time that's so very valuable to so many drivers. And it takes a lot of work to get that chance to drink the virtual milk and be able to kiss the bricks down the front straightaway here at this racetrack, to be able to celebrate. It takes a lot of work. It takes a small village in some cases for some of the top organizations. And there's a reason that they're so focused and dialed in on the open side of things as well, because it takes that much work to be able to win this race at this track, to be able to build your name here at this facility as
Oh.
one driver spun around.
And fortunately, straight back down onto pit road. We will stay green right as we enter the pit stop window. That was Jake Matheson spinning around in the 4 car and will drop down to the tail end of your field. One of the eNASCAR Coca-Cola drivers then struggling with the open wheel car, but I think given that the NASCAR series is heading to a road course this coming week, maybe can expect a little less practice on the side for Matheson, but into the outside wall and then into the inside wall as well. That should be day done, I would suspect, for him, Sommel.
Indeed, yeah, quite a disappointing way to end your fixed Indy 500. Must be a big experiment for him. Madison was doing quite well. Started in P28, gained quite a few positions, but again, when something like this happens, even though the RA team has got quite a bit of downforce on this car right now, nothing you can do about it. It's completely out of your control. Thank goodness no caution though, so that's a plus.
I know, I was about to say, just as you were pointing out that we were entering the pit stop cycle, might have really played a bit of games for some of these cars. Reminder, by the way, RaceSpot.WTF/Indy. You can follow along with live timing and scoring powered by our friends at Timing 71. You'll also be able to follow along with the action in the real world from the Indy GP that kicks off in just about 30 minutes time. Into the pit stop window we well and truly are. Jose Soria lap 31 out front. Wilson Nato slowly losing track of the top 2 contenders here. Now 1 full second separating first and third. And no one down onto the lane this time around, Justin, but it is imminent for pit stops.
Just to say that Jason Brophy has dunked down, and this is a tough pit lane to get into because you have to go from essentially more than 200 miles an hour off the corner down to just 60 miles an hour at the pit cone. And it's so easy for drivers to lock up the brakes and spin around here, try to get down to speed, to be able to duck down into your pit box. And if you can do it well, it's also important to be able to execute on the pit exit here. See with Brophy, as soon as you get off those jacks, you have to get yourself off and rolling without major tire spin or anything along those lines, but also get your way down the access road that can be fairly slippery for some. And if you can execute that time, it's going to be very valuable for some of these drivers.
Soria down, Malechko follows him, and I think that's Newsom coming in behind as well. So 3 cars from this leading train are down onto pit road as Jason Brophy builds up his speed once more and rolls back onto the back straight with some clean air to take advantage of it. The struggle for him now, Sommel, is he's not got any sort of drafting assistance, at least for Soria, who does lock up and has to go back in his box. That's going to cost the race leader a couple of tenths of a second, but he will now still have the assistance from Malechka and from Newsom.
Exactly, that's going to be critical, but he loses a position in the pit lane because of that, and also one on the track. These sort of margins, Arjuna, that is what defines any oval race, and right now, that may be the big mistake for him.
Nato and Kerwin stay out there a couple extra laps. There goes Philip Krause. You can see Total Downforce Racing driver Riley Thompson in the background as well, with Michael Overbay following him down onto the pit road. The Brazilian Nato leads from Casey Kerwin. Newsom cycles out right into the path of the 23 car. Draft able then for Nato to scoot his way down in towards turn 3. He should be down onto the lane this time around, Justin.
Now, most of the drivers are indicating over the radio that they're coming in this time by. We'll see, as it looks like able to stretch it. No, an extra lap or so. Decent amount of fuel saving coming in from some of these competitors, and keep in mind that Bono also in the 6 car is among the drivers who can go an extra couple laps as well. So all that ability to save in the draft is starting to really come into play for a couple of these competitors.
And that's where I think the fuel maps must surely have played a factor as well. Gap between Nato and Kerwin up to 1.2 seconds, but Newsom all over the rear end of your race leader. Not sure how she's going to approach this part of the race, but Nato down onto the lane this time around. He's already indicated his intentions to the rest of the drivers, Sommel. He needs to nail this pit stop because he might cycle out in front of the net race leader.
Absolutely, this is going to be critical. Dropping down the speed correctly right there before the speed limiter gets triggered should be fine. The only thing right now is not missing the pit box, and most importantly, Arjuna, the bump at the pit exit. It has got the biggest and the biggest names in all of real world and sim racing art. If Nato nails this bump correctly at the exit, should be fine, should be good, cycling out back in the lead.
Kerwin still out there, as is the Swede Hugo Olsen, so 2 drivers very much using the fuel maps to their advantage. Nato in the box. He's been there already for 9.5 seconds as he finally slots back onto the pit exit road off of the speed limiter. And there comes Kerwin. Here comes Olsen following him down as well. So every car will have come down onto pit road now. Question is, where does Nato cycle out in comparison to Phil Kraus, Robert Malechka and company? Nato will slot in right behind Jose Soria. So Malechka, the biggest winner in this cycle, Sommel, he's up to net second place.
Exactly, and Malechka now using the outside line strategy still. And I wonder how this is going to pay out for him right now. It has paid dividends what he's done so far. This might be a big motivating factor. Imagine, as a racing driver, you have been given that positive feedback at the start of the next stint saying, right, what you've been doing so far has been excellent. This is your chance to go in and maximize it.
There's Kerwin off at the pit exit. There's Olsen as well. They will cycle back into line, I think right behind Jason Brophy. These are the cars that came down last in this pit cycle. They'll also need the least amount of fuel if we can go green all the way to the end. There goes Brophy right in front of Kerwin. Kerwin has managed to hang on to 6th as Franzoni into line. And we'll have to wait for the time being. So the first of our green flag stops is in the books. And other than Jose Soria, don't think we had too many drivers making mistakes down onto pit road. And we saw, Justin, just how costly those mistakes can be.
Absolutely. Overall, the time lost was just under 2 seconds for Soria, and it was enough to now put him into the aero wash now, and he's already struggling with some of that aero wash at the head of the line as a result of that. For some of these aero competitors now, the fuel mapping definitely coming into play with how some of the packs were spreading apart towards the end of the run, where it was seen with Nato, where he was starting to drop back a little bit. Now, the fuel mapping is going to be very critical to hit your marks because, as we talked about, you run this race going backwards essentially in terms of the strategy, in terms of how you play when you come in a pit. And right now, those strategies, you want to hit a certain money mark in certain lap if you want to try and get yourself the least amount of fuel required to get towards the end of the race for the final stops.
And so the rough magic numbers, if we start working back now, Justin, because we are starting to work our way to the halfway point when you think a bit more about the strategy at the end of the race. The first magic number is 170. Your final pit stop, as long as you pit after 170, you are good to the end of the race. Then the next magic number, 140. The next magic number, 110, so on and so forth. It means if someone comes down on lap 80, they will be good to the end in terms of that magic fuel number at the end of the race.
And some of the drivers that are in the lead pack, according to my calculations, are in the midst of being able to potentially get to the 110 mark. Drivers like Kerwin are in the most comfortable positions to be able to hit that first money mark, so we'll see how things play out. Kerwin, though, going to have a little bit more of a heavier car compared to some of these other drivers and wants to try and get some of these passes done. The tough part has been Arjuna throughout this entire run, getting the pass done with the draft lock.
For the top 10, Kraus, Malechka, Soria, Nato, Brophy. That's the top 5 with Kerwin, Franzoni, Villegas, Olsen and Lewis now in the top 10. There are some big movers and shakers. Double-digit gains from Jason Brophy and Nathan Lewis in that top 10 so far. I do believe Nathan Lewis might have finished on the podium 12 months ago. He's working his way up through the fields as we ride on board with the 20 machine. And now part of the wonderful Zebra Outfit BS competition. Works his way down all the way to the inside, right behind the Swede in the 12 car. There's a car slow on the inside. That's Brandon Trost. A puff of smoke there. See if we can get the RaceSpotTV replay up, Sommel, but we stay under green flag conditions.
Luckily, could have been our third caution of the day right here with Brandon Trost. Could be worse for him. Let's have a quick look at what's happened to him right now. The inside line and yeah, losing control of the car. It's such a common thing, Arjuna, with any IndyCar series anywhere in the world. When you get to that inside line a bit too much, when you commit to it too much, carry too much speed, gone. Rear end just steps out and it just becomes a wet blanket for you eventually.
And well, second incident then for the pink machine. Still cycling around 1 lap down in 21st. You never know. Could still be looking at maybe a top 15 finish on the cards. Kerwin all over the rear wing of Jason Brophy, and I believe out of turn 2. No, in through the short chute at turn 2. It's almost contact between the two of them. Kerwin has to slot back into line, but Justin was saying slightly earlier, he's getting aggressive here, trying to close in to the top 4 cars in front.
Nearly got to the back end of Brophy, in fact, going into the corner, and I think Brophy said, you know what, you want this position so much, I'll let you go. Lifted a little bit, it looked like, in the middle of the apex that time with the close contact. So now, move Kerwin into the top 5 for one of the first times today. The tough part is, he needs to close up about an 0.8 of a second gap to get to that lead pack of 4 cars.
And I must say, for a livery done on very short notice, the car is looking good. And in the 33 cars, I don't think we had the entire field decked out in the custom livery. So just a reminder, RaceSpot.media, for those of you competing in the Open 500 7 days from today, paint submissions will be live in the next couple of days. So make sure to get your wonderful looking livery out onto the track as well. Soria in 3rd, content to run around Malechka, might be using those fuel maps to his advantage. 33 starters whittled down to now 20 cars on the lead lap, with Severi Seppa, the final car, still out there and circulating. Looks like Brandon Trost, has retired that car.
Yep, I think there's no point trying to drive on with that, so he's realized that it's better to retire rather than actually keep on driving with nothing to avail in the end. I mean, it's good, it's okay depending on what he wants to do, but in the end of the day, it's not too bad to go out there and watch this race as we are right now as well, because eventually this will become quite a fun one. And a word on the magic number, Arjuna, number 80. At that point, one wonders what could happen. Could we see a caution making things out right now? And if we don't have a caution, it could be a bit tricky to meet that number. So later on, there will be some chopping and changing in the final stints, because everyone will be going over that ideal number. So the final few stints, if we go and get a caution at around lap 80, is going to be very, very interesting on a strategic point of view, just to understand what each team and what each driver is going to do in that case.
Very much so. I mean, we're not expecting cars who have only been out there on track for 12 laps or so far to come down in 10. But like you say, if a caution comes out, that's when the games and the questions have to be answered. Who would elect to come down? I mean, if you're someone back in the pack, I'd assume you want to come down and get whatever damage you can get fixed. So they're side by side between Alessandro Bico and Andrew Roos. That's for 16th and 17th. 11 car supremely confident to sweep around the outside, and that's something you'll see in the open race as well, Justin. The outside line tends to be the preferred place to be down into turn 1.
Yes, following along with some of the drivers talking just to my left and who are watching along with tonight's race have been mentioning that line can be very strong. It's just, again, for today, it's been the fact that it's the draft that's being the factor. The open setup side of things, you get your car rolling on that side of the racetrack. You can definitely squeeze the driver underneath you down, force them to have to lift, be able to power your way on the outside. Today, it's much more difficult. So you can do that, absolutely, for the open side of things. It's just the contrast today of trying to adjust today to how the setup wants to run and trying to battle the clean air from the race leader compared to your aero wash for everyone else right now. So it's interesting how that contrast can play out.
And in a race where the last couple of years it's been a photo finish in the open race, don't necessarily know what we're gearing up for here. Malechka still able to ride around in the coattails of Kraus, but content to rim ride on the outside. Not getting close enough. The top 10 separated by just 4.5 seconds, so I guess at this point in the race, almost any one of these 20 cars is still in the mix. And for Bono, Huis, for example, 19th position, you can't count him out if strategy plays out in his favor.
You're absolutely right. There's only one race that we have to go back to understand something quite like this one. Remember the 100th running of the Indy 500? Alexander Rossi never quite seemed to be in the mix, you know. But later on, that dark horse became the eventual winner of the centenarial edition of the Indy 500. That was all down on smart strategy. And that's the one thing that we have to understand, Arjuna. When you're going on a different strategy to what the others are doing, you have to back it all the way through. You can't be underconfident about it midway through and say, yeah, it's not working, let me cut through it. You have to back it all the way to the end, because you never know really which way it plays out, considering how all the variables on the track play out. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see, firstly, who splits up the strategy, and secondly, where that ends out in the end.
Doria now much closer to the back of Malechka, peeks to the inside, but no move forthcoming, I would think. And Nathan Lewis, by the way, has dropped a couple of positions. He's now down in 14th, having lost out to Dylan Frackleton as well. Not sure if the zebra is starting to slide around a bit more than he'd like in these very warm conditions. Lap 76 out of 200. We are halfway through the second portion of the race. Pit stops expected in about 15 laps time or so, but the magic number, the window to get to the end without any additional stops, does open in just 5 laps time.
It's going to be, I think most of the drivers will get past that window, give or take, Arjuna, based on the lap totals so far. It's going to be, I think we'll see pit stops around lap 90-ish, then towards lap 120, then lap 150-ish, then lap 180-ish, if it stays green. So that's how the way is breaking down at the moment. But it's going to be the question of which drivers push that window further on back towards the checker flag throughout this entire run. And I think several drivers like Kerwin are in the best position to be able to push that towards maybe a 185 instead, if they keep hitting their number. And that's going to be the most critical part, is when you're doing a full race, a lot of the discussion for a lot of the organizations during said race is, okay, did you make your target lap? If you didn't hit the target lap, you have to try and save a ton of fuel. And right now, the pace been fairly common around the 41 3s to 5s at the moment. So, fairly evenly spread in terms of that pace for your leaders.
Taking a look, by the way, at some of these stats that Tanner Watkins of OpenWheels.com had put together back in 2019. We'll try and get that out publicly on our social media across Twitter at the conclusion of this race to help people build up for the race that's coming in this sort of boring, I don't want to call it boring, but strategic phase of the race, let's put it that way. You can maybe start thinking about some of the other things. Let's talk a bit about this car. I mean, the IR18, Justin, we've seen on Wednesdays in the Lionheart IndyCar Series, very adept. It is able to naturally cross across the road courses and the ovals. It doesn't necessarily give us the same wheel-to-wheel pack racing on the ovals that the DW12 does on a Monday night in the Lionheart Speedway Series, but it's a different type of a way of approaching aerodynamic open-wheel racing on an oval, and it always produces some interesting fights.
It absolutely does, where, yes, air wash is going to be a major factor with this car, especially with how it functions, with the windscreen, the tires, but it also provides, when you get towards a draft lock pack, potentially, you see the potential possibility for drivers to be able to work the way different lines to be able to then go side by side. It takes time, it takes a lot of talent, it takes skill to be able to have the confidence to send it, because in a couple of the cases towards the back of the field, some of the drivers have had to lift the stamp and send it towards the inside in a couple of cases with how this race has played out so far. So it brings out the talent out of the drivers, because you can catch somebody in terms of being one thing, but it takes talent and skill to then execute a pass to be able to make a move and show that speed. So are you someone who's going to be good at following someone behind, or rather running into a certain spot? Or are you going to be somebody that can claw your way through some of the effects of the aero wash and make a pass? All that comes into play, and right now, at this point, it is just that strategic point of the race where drivers are thinking about the fuel marks, but also battling the aero wash to try and keep them locked together at this moment.
And given, some of the criticisms it gets in the real world for the type of racing it sometimes puts on Sommel, it's always been a feature car here on the iRacing service. It debuted to sim racers before the real racers got to drive the car in anger, and 12 months ago when the motorsports world ground to a halt. The same thing happened with the aero screen. The first ever 500-mile race ran at Indianapolis with the aero screen happened here on the iRacing service. Another just marker of history, illustrating the collaboration between iRacing, IndyCar, and Dallara as well.
You're absolutely right, and it's shifted from Dallara to BMW as well, but them doing the same thing with the BMW M4 GT3 as well. Good to see iRacing being actively involved, and you're right, Arjuna, the iRacing was a bit of a feature car and still remains to be so. And it's lovely to see how iRacing constantly, like with every other car, putting in the time and effort to increase it, to improve it, to try and work out on things like that. I mean, the damage model has changed so much since last year. Even with the tyres, we've now got multiple tyre compounds, and one very interesting and fun change that iRacing have had to make in the last couple of months, they had to, for the road courses that is, they had to make sure that push to pass could not be activated while the car was in reverse, which means that early on, you could do that, on a road course. How crazy would that have been?
Seems like some of the clips I've seen of the NASCAR Next Gen cars going 180 miles an hour in reverse. While the IndyCar community is going to take some umbrage to this comment, I will say, despite the fact that it took several more builds to get the new damage and new tire model onto the car than maybe they would have hoped for, well, ultimately, the reason it took so long is because it was awesome when it did release. Yes, we've had little gripes that we've had to work our way through, but it's hard to argue as to how much it's reinvigorated the community, to be completely honest. We've seen that on a Monday night in terms of the strength of field races in the iRacing IndyCar Open Championship. It was Brandon Treno in the first ever season with a new tire and damage model wrestling that championship away from the Powerslide Motorsports team. It does look as though Adam Blocker and Henry Bennett are going to be dueling it out for Powerslide honors once more, but at the very least we got our first ever, if I'm remembering correctly, IndyCar Open champion that has won not just in the IRA team, not just in the DW12, but all the way back to the IRO 5 days as well. What a run for Treno, and hopefully not too much pressure on his shoulders as he heads into the month of May. Soria is looking for a way past right now, and Justin, I don't blame him. He wants to close on Krause, and he wants to do his fuel saving from second position.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that Walechka is starting to really struggle in the factory back machine and slip on behind more and more. You have to wonder if the fuel mapping is starting to factor in for Walechka, or if it's just struggling a bit since he's running a 1/10 of a second slower than the drivers around him and for much of the rest of the top 5. But the tough part has been he's gotten a chance to peek to the inside a couple times into the corner, but he hasn't fully committed to the send. You see right here, he gets this run, then lifts to save the fuel, and elects to stay on behind. So I think he's starting to pick up on the fact that Walechka might be trying to use a different map here possibly, and is saying, you know what, I'm going to lift and have a bit less throttle at the end of these straightaways and be a bit more patient. The downside is Krause is pulling away by 6/10. Now he's finally making the move.
Can he do it though? Outside line preferred from Walechka. He will defend this one as well. Soria slides up the track and has to get out of the throttle and will lose momentum down this back straightaway again. Gap between first and second out to 6.5 of a second now as the team talent number 7 pulls away at the front. Getting increasingly congested, on the edge of the top 10. Hugo Olsen is checked up behind Carlos Valleja as they're trying to close in here. Still only separated by 5 seconds is this top 10, so we are seeing that heading into the pit stop window once more. Here's Sommel is making sure you get into and off of pit road in the least time possible, as I think that was Alexis Newsom, the first car to blink. It's going to be crucial at this point of the race.
Exactly, that's the most important part. You have to control what you can control, and there's only so many things you can control in a proper pit stop. 2 of them, most importantly, good entry so that you don't overspeed, and then making sure that you get to your box correctly without sliding up ahead. I know it sounds repetitive, it sounds dull beyond the point to say, okay, get into your box properly, but there's an art to it. You have to make sure that you slide in correctly, firstly without overshooting, but there's also some minor gain that you can get by getting it in correctly. And now, of course, more pit stops. We see Soria also coming in the pit lane. Let's see how he does here. Let's see how he controls it properly.
Nato stays out, Kerwin stays out, Franzoni stays out. So the people that we expected to elongate this run, able to run around for a couple more laps. But of course, we are already in that window where drivers can make it without an additional stop on fuel. It will just be that last stop for the likes of Nato, the likes of Kerwin, that will be slightly shorter, as Kerwin's only 0.4 of a second behind the Brazilian coming down into turn 3. Don't expect either of these cars down this time around. Might be about 4 laps, Justin, before Kerwin is down on pit road.
Yeah, he and Nato have done a brilliant job on saving gas. Yes, they haven't been the quickest cars right now. They've been a 1/10 of a second off compared to the race leaders, but that's just, I think, their play right now is try and have as short as a pit stop, close out this race as possible, use each other with the draft, and go from there. They've been able to break away from the rest of their groupings as well, so they've done a brilliant job on that. Just as they say that, they pick it up to the 41.4s now as they start to push their way towards that window. They are hitting that magic number that we talked about and then some. It's just going to be interesting on how hard they can push towards the end of the race. If it stays green, is going to be the main key thing. And keep in mind, you get one caution flag, and this flips the entire strategy upside down.
Knocking on the wood around me to make sure that we don't put the commentator's curse down on it. Nato and Kerwin still out there circulating. Lap 29 for the 23 car is Severi Seppa, Alessandro Bico. The next car is down onto pit road. Jason Brophy did follow down his teammate onto pit road the last lap around. So Brophy trying to close onto the back of the top 3 net cars. They are cycling around in 12th, 13th, and 14th. Be at least 2 more laps for Nato as well, though, and I wonder if he can maybe bump down on the fuel map here, Justin, and do a bit of fuel saving, even at this point in the run.
I think they've been doing that the entire run, as some of the drivers, I think, will tell you, and some of the fans watching along, definitely shuffle the fuel maps. Don't go to the highest possible fuel map. Just try and utilize one of the lower mappings in the draft. And that's, I think, what they've done and why they're able to push so far. So it's going to be where it's going to be interesting. You have a thought on that, Samil?
No, I actually have to agree with what you say. It's perfect right nowadays because you have fuel maps. You don't have to manually, lift off the throttle as much, and it's really convenient for them. And you're spot on. You've banged it on right at the nail. This is exactly what they're doing, and staying in the draft is going to be important. But again, we've seen drivers like Maleshka getting to the outside line and making sure that while they do get the draft, they don't get the side effect of it, which is the aero wash. So interesting stuff going on here.
And the lap times between the cars that are off of pit road, there you can see Kraus, Malechka, and Soria ducking and diving, trying to find some draft behind Seppa. They're not really too much quicker than Nato out front, so I do wonder if maybe the overcut is going to work out for the Brazilian here. He is working his way down in towards turn 3. He's coming down this time as well, so Kerwin will stay out for at least 1 or 2 laps longer. Brazilian makes his way down onto pit road. Very tricky braking zone. Leaves it until the last possible minute. Locks up on the right front. He'll be hoping not to have a speeding penalty, Justin.
That's always the major risk here, is trying to maximize that. I believe he might be okay. We'll see, as it was close in terms of how close he sent it. He did get to 60 miles an hour at the commitment cone. So it's going to be working backwards from this moment on, from lap 107 to possibly lap 77 laps to go around, I should say, for this race.
Right side of your screen, there's Kerwin, still out there on track. Is he coming down in through turn 4? He works as Nato off of the lane. Kerwin out there for an additional lap. Kraus scampers on past Nato. Where's Malechka? Already passed as well. There goes Soria through into 5th. So Nato will now drop to the tail end of this grouping. And once Kerwin and Olsen cycle themselves back, it will be status quo once more here, Sommel.
Exactly, it will. Good to see Hugo Olsen also gaining up, but then on the whole front, it's interesting to see which way it's evolving. And now Kerwin finally comes out there, not losing too much time right now as it all progresses. Now this is where the fun begins, the start of another stint. Where will they go to the target number? What if we do have a caution coming up right here? That could really split things up. Here he is, back in the pit lane now.
Watch him, locks the left front this time. I don't think he'll be too concerned. He was slowing down maybe a bit early. Olsen follows him in as well. So the final cars cycle their way down onto pit road. There you can see the Swede in the yellow number 12. We'll wait and see where they come out in comparison to this group of cars. There's Kraus getting past Seppa, a lapped car. So some separation between Kraus and Malechka now in through turn 4. They were Kerwin and Olsen up on the jacks, getting their 4th new tires. Both of them roll as well. It's going to be Kerwin that's in front of Olsen, marginally shorter in the box for the Swede, and they should cycle out about 3 seconds adrift from Philip Kraus, because you can see there it's going to take them a while to build up the momentum once more here, Justin, coming off of pit road.
And if my math is right, it's going to be tight now for these drivers, where currently, according to the math, about 39 to go would be where Kerwin would have one of his final pit stops. We're talking about just 6 laps out. And that's if he and Olsen hit their same marks of 33 laps consistently. And that's going to be the tough part. Is going to be, we might see it come out to where Kerwin needs a call to go his way or strategy, because he's lost a ton of time. Compare that to Nato, who's now pushing against the fastest car on the racetrack in the 40.7s now.
Using that drop to catch up to the top three. I tell you what though, about halfway through this race, let's take a short break and step aside for a RaceSpotTV fan immersion. Let's jump on board with the Brazilian of Wilson Nato for a couple of laps here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So a couple of laps on board there with Wilson Nato, but the action is out front. Malechka and Kraus dueling for the race lead here in the second annual iRacing Fixed 500, and it is Robert Malechka up 4 positions on the day now in the race lead and in control, working lap 100 out of 200 here at the Brickyard, almost halfway through this race. And it's not been a race in which, Justin Prince, we've seen too many swaps for the race lead. This is the first time we've seen action this far into the run.
Yeah, the swap draft starting to really kick up here between these drivers. Kraus back up to the point, and these guys are getting some of the biggest runs they have been all day today now all of a sudden. They've already pulled away from the rest of the pack by more than a second. This is continuing to pull them on forward a little bit more each straightaway.
And I think the fact that Severi Seppa is in between Kraus and Soria is allowing these two to continue the draft and continue the swap as well here. Someone gap between second and third out to 1.2 seconds.
Exactly, it's just opening up that big window right now. Finally, Soria going for a move down to the inside line and seizing it. This is going to be interesting now. How does Malechka respond? Does he stay back? Does he continue with his approach? Or does he go for the aggressive, go for the jugular rather, and get the kill right now? Interesting, he's actually going for it, Arjuna.
Taking a look at the lap time, they are 0.2 of a second quicker every single time around, Justin, by virtue of this swapping. So Soria and Nato, they need to start getting together and working together as soon as they can. Otherwise, Malechka and Kraus will be out of distance very soon.
The trouble is that Nato is currently separated out by a few tenths, not close enough to be able to try and get towards the swap draft. Plus, they have the dirty air with some of the lap traffic as talked about with that blue machine you see in Seppa in the backdrop. So that's going to make things very difficult. But Malechka has been trying to get into this position all race long. Try and get himself to where he gets a run, potentially battle for the race lead. Now, feels comfortable to do so. And now we're seeing that the kid gloves are off, and now they continue to go back and forth as we're past halfway.
And still at the line. I mean, this time around, they were 3 and a bit tenths quicker than Soria and Nato. The gap now between second and third up to 1.9 seconds and climbing down in towards turn 3. It's Kraus once more to the inside, and this is respectful, and this is considered driving right now, Sommel. They know that they're pulling away every single time they're able to do this, and the gap, like I said, now up to 2 seconds.
And this is quite unlike what we see in road course racing, where if you duel against each other with such intensity, you end up losing time to people ahead of you and people behind. Here, working together is smart, and these two drivers, being right at the top level, right at the top speed, recognize this and are using it so smartly. As I said earlier in the broadcast, you have to be mindful about every single movement, every single stage about the race. This is exactly what's happening right now. Very interesting racing.
Still swapping, but Soria now is only 1.6 behind. The last time, Soria was able to close the gap. Not sure what's changed here. Maybe he's just found the correct settings on his in-car tools to follow in the dirty air of Seppa, but now no longer the front two swapping and no longer extending the gap as well. Lap 96 laps to go as we cross the yard of bricks one more time. Malechka, who does dive it down the inside, but I think in fact making a move that late in the corner down the inside, Justin, is and check these cars up very slightly.
More so in 3 and 4, I've noticed a little bit right now as Kraus again goes the inside down the middle of the straightaway. And this is right where down the straightaway Soria is starting to pick up a little bit. More so at this end of the racetrack when Kraus goes for the swap to the inside down the back straightaway. When it's done by Malechka, I've noticed, even with the later timing, it's been where they pick up time at that end in turns 1 and 2. And I think they finally realized a bit the swap was starting to lose a little bit of ground. Kraus a little bit loose. And now Soria losing a little bit of ground as they go back single file.
But the fastest car on track last lap around, guess who? Casey Kerwin, who's coming onto the back of Soria and NATO with intent there as well. Jump on board with the number 1 car. You can see in front, half a second to NATO. Just a couple of tenths in front to Soria as well. Most recent retirement was Graham Carroll for Red Bull Racing Esports in the 19. Leaves us with just 20 cars still circulating, 18 of them on the lead lap. Michael A. Overbay is 1 lap down with Severi Seppa, the 6th car, in between the race leaders. 2 laps down, but continuing to pound away. There is Overbay. He's got some clean air to speak of. A 94 long laps for him to go then to take that car back into the checkered flag and down into the garage area once more. Check back in with Malechka and Kraus, who are not swapping this time down in through turn 3. It's Kraus who leads and across the yard of bricks. Let's see if they continue to swap here because Soria only 1.3 behind.
Indeed, yes. So this tactic that was working quite well early on, not so much paying dividends right now, but yeah, I think they've realized it. I think they've recognized that it makes no more sense anymore to swap around. But early on, Arjuna, it was helping them out quite a fair bit. So back it is again for Malechka going on the outside line. Back it is again for Kraus being on the normal approach. When Soria joins this battle, I swear this is going to be so much fun to watch out for. Clashing styles, clashing approaches, and then a different story in the race altogether as well from a strategic point of view. I think this is going to be very, very fun to watch eventually.
And I'm loving it because you've got Kraus, NATO, Brophy, and Olsen.
Exactly.
Maybe Newsom as well. Those are the only cars in the top 10 that I would have any expectation of seeing in 7 days' time come the iRacing Indy 500, the 12th annual running of that. Malechka, very strong competitor, but not sure if he's got the setup and knowledge and backing to be able to throw him into the top 33 for the very first time. Soria is strong, but again, relatively new to the IndyCar. Unsure as to where the setup knowledge is going to bring the Oris Racing team. For Casey Kerwin, well, he's got slightly other more important things to deal with this coming week as the eNASCAR Coca-Cola Series does head to the Lone Star State and the Circuit of the Americas, if I'm remembering correctly. It will be a duel between the Coanda duo of Mitchell de Jong and Bobby Zelensky, I'm sure, at the front of the field. Franzoni, quick as well, but not sure about that open setup knowledge. Same with Valejas as well. So got that nice mix of newcomers to the iRacing IndyCar community, and I mean that in the Indy 500 sense of the word, and then these new guys getting an experience of the Brickyard for the very first time, Justin, and really enjoying a fixed setup competition.
And for a lot of the drivers, it's about having fun too. Keep in mind, where for them, they've been practicing to make sure they're ready to go to try and have a good performance. And a lot of people take pride in having a good finish here in this race. And it's why drivers have worked so hard to prepare for this race. But you also want to have fun while doing so. to where you enjoy what you're doing, you enjoy racing around the racetrack. So it's been very interesting in terms of how things have played out for some of those drivers who may be new to this event to show, okay, this is what I can do in this situation. And by the way, looping back to the Circuit of the Americas race as well, that's going to be an interesting one as well for the competitors for the NASCAR side, because first time there at this race, at that racetrack, and that's a very difficult track too to be able to race around, where some have described it as a 3-mile flat track, in the words of Jimmy Mullis, with how that track is for next week.
And of course, Justin, you'll be part of the broadcast team this coming Tuesday. Tell us a bit more about that. That's going to be a really intriguing race. Like you say, the first time we head to the Circuit of the Americas, kind of a precursor for when the NASCAR Cup Series visits for their first trip as well, later in 2021.
As well as for the eNASCAR iRacing Pro Invitational Series that takes place the day after, absolutely. It's going to be a very competitive race at the Circuit of the Americas, potentially, with not just Zelensky, who's looking to win another road course race, the most dominant road course racer in series history, but as well, you have drivers like Mitchell DeYoung that's going to be in the conversation. He's always been very quick on road courses, of course, with the Porsche Taycan Esports Super Cup. But you also have to include drivers like Mullis, who has finished second in back-to-back road course races, as well as the fact that you also have Vicente Salas, who is also someone who just competed in an event this week in preparation for that, along with Mullis, along with Zach Novak and company, and competed very well. So it's where it's going to be a very stacked race. And compared to other road course races on the NASCAR side, it's the question of who's going to take the checker flag, because there's honestly so many drivers who could take it this season.
And I think that's the great thing about this World Championship year as well. I mean, it's been how many different winners to kick off the season, Justin?
As many races as winners so far, to put it that way.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember. It's either 7 or 8 at the last count, so who knows? I mean, we could have
7.
Okay, there we go, 7. So it might be 8 if we get a first-time winner from the Circuit of the Americas. Also, I must say, wonderful. We were talking about the work that BMW Dallara have done to bring content to iRacers globally before it's even in the hands of the competitors. What can you can't talk about that without recognizing all of the hard work that the NASCAR team and the iRacing staff did to bring the next-gen cars to the iRacing service and to make it publicly available for the general public to get their first hands on the car at the same time as pro racers as well. What an incredible achievement and a sign of the changing times as iRacing continues to sign more and more of these wonderful content deals. The Indy GP, by the way, has just gotten underway, so if you're watching here live on RaceSpotTV for the second annual Fixed 500, thank you for sticking with us. Maybe you have a second screen experience up as well. Why not get a third? You've got a number of Twitch streamers here in this race. You can have your pick, Casey Kerwin in 5th, or potentially even Riley Thompson down in 12th. Franzoni down onto the pit road this time around. We are entering the pit stop window with 85 laps to go here, and Sommel, the magic number, has begun.
Absolutely, it has. Drivers have to backtrack on it. This seems to be the window right now. So Franzoni, he last boxed on lap number 92. Here we are. It's going to be quite interesting. What? 200 minus 85 is, you can tell maths is not my favorite thing in the world. It's 115. So, yeah, Franzoni actually not going too long, Arjuna, interestingly. He's boxed out at around 20 odd laps. So this is where the backtracking properly begins. And Franzoni being the first one to do that.
And he must be banking on maybe a caution cycling in his favor, because you don't want to necessarily go one lap down. I believe that's Alexis Newsom who's going to roll out and cycle back into this leading group of cars. 84 laps to go. Magic number well and truly has come and passed. So wonder now if there's someone here in this leading group. Maybe Hugo Olsen, who's 6 seconds adrift now in 8th place. Maybe he tries something different with just a couple of pit stops to go. Let's jump on board with the Swede. Missed out on qualifying for the first round of the ISOWC by narrowest of margins, as here comes Phil Kraus down onto pit lane. So I was wondering if someone's going to try something different, and well, Justin Kraus is the first one to blink from the race lead.
Well, he's only been able to make it 29 laps because of clean air and how hard he's had to push as a result of said clean air. So it's been impacting his fuel stretches. Everyone else around has been able to save fuel to go an extra lap or two. So that's now coming into play on how that strategy has now played out for Kraus. Now how it plays out towards the end of the race, still going to be intriguing. Kraus off and away, simple service of 9.7 seconds in the pit box.
No major drama there. Malechka has some clean air with Seppa separating him from Soria and Nato. Kerwin has slid slightly further back as here comes down onto pit road. Carlos Villejas and Riley Thompson, Dylan Freckleton following him as well. 82 laps to go then. Out of the 18 or so cars that were on the lead lap entering the cycle, it very much is still wide up in the air if a caution comes out. But if we stay green until the end of this race, Sommel, I'm starting to wonder if you're not Robert Malechka or Philip Kraus, you want to be someone by the name of Casey Kerwin.
Exactly, it's playing so well into Casey Kerwin's hands right now. Malechka finally boxes in, and this is going to be fun. So does Soria. Nato stays out, of course, because Nato, remember, going longer on that last stint. So it's not just what a couple of drivers that are boxing in early to try and get to the magic number. It's everyone recognizes it, and now the fun begins. This is where the backtracking part probably stocks in, and so the target is clear. What could change it is a big caution, and we know things can go really wild here.
Well, you know what's changed it? Why has Kerwin come down this time around? I am befuddled by the decision from the eNASCAR Coca-Cola driver. He should, if anything, have stayed out there in my opinion. What I think he's done is taken a slightly shorter stop, 8.1 seconds. So that's 1.5 shorter than the cars he came down with. What he's done is stayed in the draft, Justin, and in the leading group as well.
Interesting call here, but might be a call where he's thought, okay, I can't make it on less fuel here, or try and stretch it out to where save a stop possibly. So why not try and put myself in a spot where I can try and be in the lead pack, take less fuel, have a shorter stop? Well executed. It's a pretty smart move to realize that and be able to gain the time overall, gain about a second or so. The tough part's going to be the swap draft now coming in.
Lewis is down onto the pit road this time around. Nato and Olsen, I am befuddled by their choice now to stay out there as side by side, almost contact. Oh, that was close between Soria and Kerwin. Kerwin holds on for now, but Nato and Olsen, no draft there. They are 0.3 of a second slower lap after lap. They are still out there and pounding away though, making the most of the fuel they have. Nato does have the draft from Newsom in front. Olsen has a bit of a pull from Thompson and Freckleton as well, but they are still slower. Not sure when they'll come down onto pit road here, Sommel.
Exactly. I think they're banking on a caution of sorts because they're extending it. So eventually what this can do is allow them, if we do stay green, that is, assuming that, which is a big assumption by the way, that if they do stay green by the way, they can have a shorter stop right down at the very end of the race and then go for a final push, maybe without having the pressure of fuel saving that particular stint. So who knows which way it's going to go as now Ferreira and Ruiz both get in the pit lane.
So a couple more cars down onto the lane. When will the top two power slide drivers do so? I'm trying not to be and let my bias show through here, but as a member of the Power Slide Motorsports outfit, it's hard not to root for first the Brazilian and the Swede, now running in first and second. Very much a global operation, despite the fact that IndyCar is the literal definition of American open-wheel racing, but such a global community we have here on the iRacing service. There's Kraus, there's Malechka. They are back to swap drafting between the two of them. Last time around, it was a 49.54 for Malechka compared to a 41.224 for the race leader. So 0.3 between Nato and the 5 there, Justin.
And the fresher tires now on Malechka as well. We'll see how big of a difference that ends up playing here, but it's going to be important where that draft now comes into play. Kraus had the lift coming off the corner, though. Big run this time to try and get it back to the inside.
Lap time for each of them, 41.369 for Kraus. They were a bit slower than Nato, but they were faster than Olsen, so it's give and take every single lap right now. And for Olsen, who's still got 3 laps before he will be due down onto pit road, maybe it's working in his favor in a way that we can't see up here in the box. 76 to go as Morales down onto the pit road this time around. waiting to see if it will be Nato down this time or the next time around. There goes the 26, no mistakes, as he slides into his box, goes up on the jacks for 4 fresh tires for the penultimate time in today's action. There he goes. Nato still out there. Olsen is still out there. This is an interesting call, Justin, but here comes the race leader.
And we'll stretch it only to 32 laps this time, so still in a tough box. And Olsen also having to come in. He only made it 30 laps this time. So not where these drivers need to necessarily be to have the shortest possible time, but now back to the strategy game once more up towards the front because Malechka starting to lift coming off some of the corners once more. He's still trying to utilize the third line as well to try and get some clean air to the nose. And you'll see, I believe, towards this end of the speedway, gets a bit of a run, could take the opportunity to make the pass if he wants. He'll try it.
And there's going to be a swap there as well. They cycle right in front of Nato, who's going to have to build up his speed as quickly as he can. The two Powerslide teammates working together to come down onto pit road and I think connect with one another and build up that draft once more. Malechka and Kraus then, first and second is Franzoni, who's been the biggest winner in this pit cycle, now in a podium position. But he sees those two leaders swapping in front. Sommel, if you're Franzoni, you need to use this drop and close up as quickly as you can.
Absolutely, this is your moment. You've gained up so much in that pit cycle. You have to make sure that you solidify, that you cement your gain and get something on the track. But first, Malechka to the inside line at turn 1.
And he's through as well, so swapping now for the race lead. Can they pull away from the Brazilian that finds himself in third? The Brazilian that we want to watch out for on the strategy now, though, finds himself in 6th. His teammate, the Swede, 5 seconds further back, so maybe you start counting Olsen out of this one. Now you look at the top 6 contenders. Kraus back to the race lead with Malechka in 2nd, Franzoni 3rd, Kerwin 4th, Soria in 5th, then Wilson Nato being hunted down by Carlos Villegas. So there are 6 cars still in with a shout here. 74 laps to go, Justin. It's all going to come down to that very final stop.
And I think that's why how aggressive some of these drivers are now racing up at the very front to get the clean air is going to be, because we've seen how big the strategy can be in terms of getting yourself in this position, Arjuna, but also how powerful the clean air has been once the tires start to come up to scuffs and up to temperature. And that's why I think both of these drivers are swap drafting so hard to try and battle hard for this race lead. Franzoni is now within about a second or so of P2.
I think let's watch for the lap time coming out of turn 4. Malechka once more up into that second lane as he builds up the momentum and tries to avoid wearing his tires. Pokes out at quite a nice point to get the swap done. The lap time will be a 41.261 versus a 41.279. So there's not too much advantage being pulled by the race leaders anymore. And if Franzoni, Kerwin, and Soria can get organized, they will once more pull onto the back of these race leaders. And we will see where it cycles from there. But pit stop's not expected now for another 20 laps or so. So we're now back into this portion of the race where things will swap around. For Malechka, Justin, I'm just thinking back to the start of May. I mean, what a run it's been for him. His first ever Lionheart race. Pole, the victory as well. He had a 100% record leaving the Atlanta Motor Speedway. Not such an easy run at the Phoenix Raceway this past Monday, but he's very much stepping up in this IndyCar in the month of May.
Very talented driver, and he's shown that so far when it comes to his skill on the ovals, to be able to get the strategy dialed in, but also how he's able to make passes. He's someone that seems to think a couple steps ahead and thinks big picture when it comes to these types of situations. And we've seen that this race as well, where if he realizes he can't get a run, he'll try and make a move. Something's going on with Franzoni, though. He's on the bottom of the racetrack.
He must have hit the wall. There's no other explanation for a car to be slowly down on the access road like that coming down onto pit road. So a disaster then for the Brazilian. Malechka back to the race lead as Franzoni now loses out to Newsom and Olsen as well as he's down onto pit road. Jason Brophy has come down as well, I'm watching. I wonder if there was some contact between the two of them potentially, or if somehow two cars have had some rather unfortunate damage on the same lap. The end result, though, is the gap between first and second is now up to 1.4, and it's Casey Kerwin in a podium position here, Sommel. 9 positions gained on the day.
What a run it has been for Casey Kerwin so far. Very smart in terms of strategy. Remember, big gains all the way through with Franzoni down as well. It clears up another window. Now again, Maleshka constantly swapping those positions. And the interesting thing is, Arjuna, we should track what kind of impact it has on the gap to Casey Kerwin right now. Because previously, we saw that gap being cut down slightly when these guys were dueling up ahead. Now let's see what Casey Kerwin is able to do. Still not very much in the draft train here.
Oh, and take a look at this slow-mo RaceSpotTV replay of Franzoni in through the short chute of turn 1, bouncing up into the outside wall, and explains why he came down onto the lane. He is now, I think, back out on track potentially. Oh no, sorry, excuse me. He is done for the race, so we are now down to just 17 cars still out there and circulating, with 14 of them on the lead lap. The leaders continue to swap around, but guess what? Casey Kerwin only 0.8 of a second back now, Justin, as we work down into turn 2.
Kerwin is pushing as hard as he can right now to get up here, and he's been working slowly but surely in that exit machine to get himself in this position. It's been an interesting race to watch for Kerwin, but the swap drafts are not helping the game of time anymore, especially with the tires warmed in and warmed down. 41 flats for Kerwin, 41 threes for these drivers swapping back and forth. The question is going to be, when does it give for the pace for Kerwin now as he tries to push as hard as he can in the field now? 230 miles an hour at the end of the straight for Kerwin.
And Sommel, I'll pose this question to you. I'm not really sure if any of Kerwin's prior experience is very much going to be applicable here, because I think some people might just think all oval racing is the same. You drive around 2 left-hand corners and it's as easy as pie, but that's very much not the case here. You've got the in-car tools. We've seen how easy it is for cars to wash up into the wall through dirty air. Kerwin is someone to keep your eye on here.
Kerwin has been gaining in terms of confidence while he's been on the track right now, and this recovery of sorts by him right now clearly goes to show what kind of confidence he's having. And you're right, Arjun, it's a different car completely. No other series really has such an impact on weight jackers and stuff like that one. And here, it's such a big and such a steep learning curve when you come in to drive the IR18. I'm sort of amazed that Kerwin is actually able to do so well in this, even though, when you actually consider that normally he's more of a NASCAR driver as such.
And what a great clip there was it at the end of the 2020 season, Justin, where Kerwin, with a mad dash in the final restart of the race, to lock himself back into the series. I mean, the emotion that you got to see on his face was absolutely incredible to see, and Kerwin is very much, if you want a second screen experience, he's probably the one that you should go and check in right now.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be very focused in and pumped up right now with how this race is played out. He was definitely pumped up at that time because strategy came in with the tires towards the closing stages of that race. And don't forget, he's got experience too when it comes to road course racing. He runs a lot of road racing events on iRacing in a lot of the various different official races. He's also raced the pro level at dirt before, so he is a multifaceted driver that's able to race in multiple different disciplines. And now he's showing those skills in the open wheel machine. He's dealing with a bit of the aero wash, I think, right now, though his car was a bit bobbly through turns 3 and 4.
Just had a bit of a chuckle from one of my Discord chats that I've been checking in with throughout the race here. Of course, for those who have been following with global news, there was a bit of a fuel shortage in America, portions of America, over the past couple of days. Well, for those who live outside of the US and are maybe accustomed to the slightly higher fuel prices that my fellow Americans have had to contend with over the last couple of days, now you have to think about your fuel costs, and not in terms of miles per gallon, but in terms of miles per gallon. And I think that's probably the same thing you're seeing from these drivers here. It's as close to foot to the floor as they can get, Justin, in this draft, even because they just have so much downforce that they can stay in the draft and almost be flat as well. It's all about the minute differences in terms of fuel saving, in terms of fuel map, that they're able to work against one another.
And aero wash as well as how you set the weight jacker and ARB to be able to rotate your way to the corner. One driver coming in for an early pit stop, Dylan Freckleton, has just had the duck in, was inside the top 15. So the 31 all of a sudden has just ducked down Arjuna.
Not sure why, and one of the only drivers to qualify for the Open Wheels 500, not once but twice, as an independent entry. Now down onto pit road. He'll be glad to have a fixed setup for today's action. Not so much attention has to be spent in terms of race prep, but is looking like a rather long stop. It's been 20 seconds and counting, so either there's some damage or there's a penalty he's having to serve as well. Left side of the screen, you were seeing the battle for the race lead, and no longer swapping between first and second. Malechka is well and truly in control, Sommel, and Kerwin is starting to slip back into the clutches of Jose Soria as well.
Exactly, works out well for both Malechka and Trost right now. Kerwin is closing up a little bit, but then he's also got his own battles to fight eventually. So I'm keen to see which way this battle goes eventually now, because Malechka and Trost, both of them really doing a good job now, not having to fight against each other, not having to use the draft advantage to try and build up a big gap right there. With only, 60 odd laps to go right now, and that final pit stop coming in rather soon, this battle could be elevated. This battle will have even higher stakes than it already has. Should be crazy.
And Justin, you were going through the replay to take a look at what happened to Freckleton. It seems to be a bit of deja vu there.
Yeah, I hit the wall coming into the short chute in turns 1 and 2, and that seems to be a trouble spot for drivers so far now in this midway portion onward. With how the rubber's built up in the heat of the racetrack, drivers have been sliding and hitting into the wall when they've been having a decently far back distance from some of the drivers in the draft. So this is going to be where you have to keep in mind, you mentioned you can go a lot in the throttle in the corners because of the amount of downforce, but you go too much in the throttle, you're sailing up in that wall, and that likely means you're going to have to get chassis repairs done.
And so we were wondering what was happening to Nato as well in terms of this strategy call. Well, is it cycling out in his favor potentially? He's, about 1.2 seconds behind the top 4 as things stand. He is building up momentum and trying to close the gap there. But you can see left side of the screen, the stint length, and I mean, 6 laps, 7 laps shorter than a lot of his competitors around. That equates almost a third of a stop in terms of pit lane time there, Sommel. I mean, is Nato trying to just work this in that final stop in the race? I didn't necessarily think it was going to play out in his favor, but only 3 seconds behind the race leader. You never know if he'll cycle to the front.
And it's going to be about the final pit stop eventually. What kind of a difference does Nato have over there? As we've been mentioning time and again, it's the final stint of the race when you can actually crown a winner or a loser. And that part, Arjuna, if Nato boxes in late and has a shorter stop, it could very well give him the advantage in terms of track position, right? And the intriguing part is we can't tell right now. That's the fun part. We can't predict. That's going to be interesting. What does Nato do? How much of a shorter stop does he get eventually? That's going to be the fun part, and I have to thank him for creating a sense of unpredictability in this race right now.
It's played out in his favor, but the global power slide motorsports team, Hugo Olsen, still nestled in 8th and adrift of the leading pack. He's in a battle with Alexis Newsom for 7th, about 5.5 seconds adrift from the top 6. So they'll have to see what they can do, maybe hoping for a late race caution. We are approaching final round of pit stops, and guess what? Lap traffic for the first time in quite a while is going to be a factor once more. Here is Alessandro Bico looking off the rearward shot from him, Justin, as here comes the race leader to get on past.
And Malechka really had to get out of the gas that time. I think he expected him to go a different line, possibly had to go up and lift on the high line. So that cost him a little bit of time as a result here. So it's going to be where you don't want necessarily to be held up too much by traffic. At the same time, it seems that Bico's not going to be willing to give this up easily and fall a lap down in this race.
And he is the last car on the lead lap, so you can understand his not wanting to go a lap down. Malechka, I think, says, you know what, if you're going to fight that hard, I'll come down onto pit road. 57 laps to go. The penultimate stop then for the 5 car. No one follows him in. He might have been hoping for that to build up the speed once he gets off the lane once more. Newsom and Olsen elect to come down as well together. They'll at least have some assistance with one another. It'll be interesting to see how it all cycles out then. For the meantime, Alessandro Bico has a bit of clean air in his rearview mirror, but he'll have Philip Kraus closing once more, Sommel. And if I'm Kraus, maybe I do the same thing. Come down onto pit road this time around so I don't lose time behind lap traffic.
Exactly, you have to cover it off, you have to understand what's going to happen, and that lap traffic can really be so irritating. No blue flags in oval racing, right? So you have to use your pace to get around them. And critically at this stage of the race, the outside line is going to be used less often because of all the marbles that could be accumulating right there as well. So that is going to be a fun challenge. What do? Do you double cross it? Do you try and cut out the lap traffic, or do you say, right, I've got enough confidence in my car, let me go ahead, let me push it? If you do that, remember, your tires could also be under some scrutiny by all the aero wash that could be coming out here.
Still waiting to see if Kraus is going to come down onto pit road. There's Malechka by himself up to about just shy of 360 kilometers an hour in towards turn 1. Here comes Kraus down onto pit road. He is followed in by Casey Kerwin. Nato and Soria stay out there. Now we will see, Justin, how this is all going to play out, because 3 different strategies seem to be playing themselves out.
Keep in mind that Kraus was at 73 miles an hour at the cone. He's in the gray area potentially for speeding. It's all down to the timing segments now to see if Kraus got through cleanly to get the service done properly. We'll see how things play out. But Kerwin able to have just a 9-second pit stop, and Kraus, no penalty, actually comes out side by side with Kerwin.
Boy.
Oh, and that could have been close, and that could have ended in disaster. If anything, it's going to check them up as they get back out onto the racetrack. There goes Malechka around the outside. You can see the red and white car back into the net race lead. And well, Matthew Presley was saying advantage Malechka. Well, he's being proven right, Sommel.
Exactly. Malechka coming out there and going all guns blazing. Where does he cycle out in the net sense? Here comes Soria as well eventually. See if Malechka, yep, of course Malechka will go past him. Oh boy, this is going to be interesting. This final stint is going to be crazy. We have a rough idea of how it's going to cycle out eventually in terms of their standings on the track, but how they actually manage the tires in the field in the final part is going to be intense.
Jose Soria, the latest car onto the lane. There goes Malechka. There goes Kraus as well. I think Soria, though, will be able to tuck in right behind Casey Kerwin, so it might be a 4-way battle now once more between these cars. There you can see Soria has to pull in right behind Kerwin as he builds up to speed. It's Riley Thompson down onto the pit road this time around, ticking the laps over until 50 to go. Total Downforce Racing car down onto the lane, onto the jacks as well, as he recovers from an incident that he had earlier in this race. There is the race leader, still Wilson Nato, tucked up behind some lap traffic. He's not due for another couple of laps here, Justin, but I would not be surprised if he comes down slightly early.
Especially seeing how big the traffic has been. That's Severi Seppa, by the way, that's in front. That's Newsom, that's behind right now. It's just been how this has been played out. 41.4s compared to the 40.7 turned by Kraus for comparison's sake. So this traffic definitely being a major factor right now for NATO, I believe, to be able to try this out. Now remember, trying to save fuel to try and have a quick final stint of this race. The problem's going to be, I think he's potentially too far back to potentially get there if he tries to go for the shorter pit stop at the end strategy.
I think a better lap time comparison would actually be Malechka, who's just gotten passed by Kraus in net 5th position. The lap times between Nato and Kraus have been holding, Nato and Malechka have been holding relatively constant, whereas it's been Kraus that's been using the draft and trying to close the gap as well. Biko down onto the lane this time around. We are officially in the final quarter of this race. It started off a little bit elbows out, 3 cautions in the first 50 laps or so, Sommel, but it's cleaned itself up. We've only got, unfortunately, 9 cars on the lead lap, but I tell you what, it's going to be a shootout all the way to the checkered flag.
Exactly, and it's all dependent on strategy. We have so many split approaches going on right here. What about Nato? Will he have the edge later on because he's going longer? Perhaps he could have the advantage in terms of a shorter stop and then having to push hard later on, but I'm not sure if that's the best approach because track position is turning out to be so valuable here. See, that's what happens when we are confused, when we have no idea. That's what gets you the most excited.
Another Brazilian down onto the lane. Great to see, by the way, not just Nato representing Powerslide, but Franzoni and Ferreira representing the EG Racing team as well. There goes Ferreira into the box for the penultimate time. Up on the jacks he will go. 4 fresh Firestone tires ready to be placed onto that car. Down he drops, 8.4 seconds stationary. He'll roll out at the edge of the top 10. There's Nato still out there on the track, but now being harassed by Alexis Newsom behind here, Justin. If you're Nato, why not come down onto the lane this time around?
I'm not quite sure at this point now because he's starting to definitely lose a bit more time. 42-1 last time by. And more traffic is joining this slipstream pack as well. And I think he's realized I got to get some clean air and fast. Freckleton finally letting him on go there.
And Nato is not just a talented sim racer, but also equally talented up here in the broadcast booth, usually in his native Portuguese rather than English. Down through turn 4. Is he coming down? No, he's got the clean air and he's going to stay out there for now as well. So he'll tick it on over to 47 laps to go in the race lead. The gap between him and Phil Kraus, 29.5 seconds. And when you think about the pit lane time here, even if he has a shorter pit stop, he's going to end up 5 seconds adrift from the race leader, Sommel.
And that's a lot. That I think is going to be a bit too much for Nato to catch on later on. Even with draft assistance, it's turned out to be so hard right here to gain time to pass somebody. I think it's not going to be working on so well for him later on. But again, you still never know which way it's going to go. There's always the impending caution that could come in at any point of time. So there's that element of excitement. And for Nato, I think this strategy of going long, on paper at least, seemingly has backfired. Let's see which way it progresses. We still have quite a fair bit of time to go till we find out what happens eventually.
Nato works lap 29 on the run. Still no indication he's coming down onto pit road, but his lap time across the line is a 41.422 in comparison to a 4.39 for Phil Kraus. So at half a tenth, if that, maybe at one tenth of a tenth, going to Nato. I wonder how far he's going to be, if he's going to have any kind of draft to really bring him back into the fight. He'll find himself maybe 1 second adrift from Villegas and then 4 seconds adrift from Soria. So that's a lot of work for him to overcome. For Powerslide Motorsports, I don't think the strategy has necessarily played out the way they would have hoped, but I guess you've got to commit to what you have done, and that's what the Brazilian is trying to do. If a caution comes out at any point now, though, who knows, Justin? It could throw a huge wrench into all these plans.
If anything, it might help a bit of the plans as some of the traffic Raleigh Thompson now passes on by, because his bed's made. He's committed to the strategy for this entire race now. It's going to be hard to deviate from it, because there's been in many cases where we've seen in the past in races, a driver thinks about going on one call, deviates from it in the middle of said call, and in turn it backfires. The only driver I've seen it not backfire for is Casey Kerwin, and that's because Casey Kerwin was able to also put in the right amount of fuel to be able to make it work. As Nato's coming in this time, we're talking about a stint that would be coming towards 10 to go for the final pit stop of this range, and it's still not big enough of a lead that's been coming down as time has gone on, keep in mind, for him to make this work.
I think the key thing would be, as you can see, the purple and black finally down onto the lane, very deep under the brakes as well. That was fast. Oh, that was rapid. Nato might have to pay the penalty for that. We will wait and see. But regardless, he would cycle out into clean air, would be down on speed, and would fall off the tail end of this group that we're looking at once more. He needed the gap to be more like 33 seconds to Phil Kraus to be able to pull on to the back. Finally in the box, and we will watch and see how long he is stationary. Already been there for 5 seconds and counting as he goes up on the jacks. Down he goes, 4 fresh Firestones. No penalty to serve there, but you can already see there, Sobel, the race leader's down in through turn 1, and Nato finally releases the pit speed limiter.
He does, and it's not worked out well for him. The important part is, what kind of a gap does he have behind? And you're right, it's that 5 second number that you mentioned, Arjun. A good calculation right there. He needs a lot. He needs a slip up and then more to get something big in terms of a podium in this race. But we all know at Indianapolis, it's not the podium sitters that are rewarded. It is just the winner.
Well, if anything, the saving grace for Nato now, Justin, is he's come out right behind Severi Seppa. So it's lap traffic, yes, but it's someone who can build up his speed, pull him along. And so like you were saying, if that final stop is that much shorter, who knows, Nato might still be in with an outside chance.
Especially if attrition comes into play, because that's going to be another saving grace. Is if there's a late race caution, and that's the big if, as I knock on wood. Yes, I did that in person as well. you are in a spot where most drivers may take tires because, Arjuna, we've seen before in a race where drivers elected not to take tires. This was in the DW12, keep in mind, but still going to be very beneficial here, where the tires were enough to be able to push them on by the rest of the field. It might be in a spot where he's hoping for that to be the sequence where everyone then has to come in late, and if they don't, he tries to push forward on fresher tires with only a few drivers on the lead lap. He doesn't lose too many spots. So it's that kind of a thought process, I think, that has to come into play now on top of everything else. The problem is you just can't depend on someone having a major issue, especially with a lot of the packs now forming up into smaller groupings.
I actually think, Justin, even though we've got sweltering track temperatures, upwards of 56 degrees Celsius, 133 Fahrenheit for those living in the United States, tire fall-off hasn't necessarily been as much as expected, and I mean that in multiple ways. Driver feeling, lap time fall-off, it's a lot more constant than you would think. And for Wilson Nato, who last time around did a 41.167, so 4/10 quicker than the race leaders, never say never here. I mean, we are counting him out over the last 10 laps, but Indy produces magical finishes, and you never know how things are going to end here.
Yeah, there's been plenty of wild finishes. There was personally one race I called that led to a 4-line finish, as Biko has now had a problem in the 30 machine. Believe he hit the wall. No caution, we stay green.
It was coming out of turn 4, and there was heavy contact as well. Coming in towards turn 4 through the short chute of turn 3. And Nato and Seppa, I think, might have had to check up slightly there, but no harm, no foul. 39 laps to go. Almost into that final pit window here, Sommel. Let's get some predictions from the both of you. And we'll start with you, Sommel. Who's going to win here today?
This is a tricky one. I think there's a good chance that Maleshka gets something good going on later on. I've loved what he's done so far. I think it's going to be him. He's just shown that sort of audacity with his approach to try and get those big moves in, just like he's doing right now. I think it's going to be him at the win.
What about you, Justin? So Malechka for Sommel, are you going to make it a stamp of approval for the rookies here?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure how this could play out. I've been keeping an eye on Kerwin. He's been doing a good job staying within range of all of this, but Kraus has been doing a very solid job in the clean air. I think Kraus, especially the fact he's in position to go for the swap drop down the backstretch at the moment, might be in a good spot. I'm going with Kraus.
Okay, so I think we're going to have 3 different guesses up here in the booth, because I'm going for Casey Kerwin, because guess what, guys? He's been tucked up there in 3rd, able to save fuel, maybe use the fuel maps to his advantage as well. We know Kraus and Malechka have not been able to do the same. Who knows, maybe Kerwin is going to pull that strategy masterclass out of his pocket, because he already had a bit of an advantage in the last cycle, and he's used that to close the gap and find some track position. Can he do it once more with 37 laps to go here, Justin?
I think really it's going to come down to the timing of some of these moves, where right now, I've noticed Kerwin in particular has been trying to save. Whenever he gets an opportunity to peek to the inside, he usually lifts and elects to stay in the line because, well, there's still plenty of time to make a move. The urgency is going to pick up, though, in about 20 laps from now. Even when we go in for the first pit stop, the next pit stop sequence, rather, next few laps, that's where I think we're going to see some more bolder moves of drivers realizing, we're on fresh tires, we've got to make this move now. Right now, we're in the draft lock stage almost with the aero wash, so it's going to, I think, come down to a move possibly within about 25 laps to go to determine this race winner overall. It's going to be the matter, though, of when the clean air starts to equalize out and pull on forward compared to the dirty air, and how the drivers are lined up in terms of how this battle could form up. As here comes Kerwin, he wants to make his move.
Oh, and that's bold. He's not going to be able to get it done because Malechka says, no thank you, I'm going to hold on to 2nd for now. This will enable, guess who? Jose Soria, who's now only 1 second adrift from the race leader, to be brought into this leading group of cars. Very much could be anyone's game in the top 4. As Matthew Presley says, whoever in this top 4 pits first will cycle to the race lead, and that's when the racing begins. If you're Kerwin, if you're Soria, you need to go for the undercut as soon as the pit window opens. The gap back to Wilson NATO, Sommel, has not really been changing. It's still 5 seconds, but NATO has closed up on Carlos Faleas.
He absolutely has, and he has to get past the Faleas to get anything on the guys right there in the top 4, and he does. Nicely done right there by NATO. Smart, controlled and composed driving. This is where the fun begins. We're reaching that golden number, Arjuna. 34 laps, and in what? Only a couple of minutes, we get to see which way the race finally goes. Side-by-side action here. That is stunning stuff.
I think it gives you an indication. Kerwin knows it's time to go, and he's trying to get past Malechka in through turn 4. Malechka runs up not just one lane, but almost 2 lanes, building up his momentum. Not helped him though. Here comes Kerwin, well and truly in the draft as they cross the yard of bricks. Kerwin's going to squeeze him and try and sling it down to the inside, but Malechka in the 5, still holding on strong. 33 laps to go. It's a magic number here at the Brickyard. It's a magic number as well, because 4 cars very much in the mix here. Wilson NATO has gotten past Faleas in the 8 and is trying to do what he can on a different strategy as well. It's wonderful, Sommel, when you get to the end of an endurance race. You called it an endurance race at the start, and you still have strategy and wheel-to-wheel action out on track.
Exactly. It's so satisfying. It's like watching a good movie where there is 30-40 odd minutes of build-up, and initially it may feel like, yeah, should I leave watching this? And no, and you stick around with it, you persist, and then that build-up leads to such a strong climax. This right here is leading to that climax in only a few minutes. Get yourselves in, folks. This is going to be so intense now. This is going to be crazy.
Well, and the commentary booth has 3 different winners. They're running 1, 2, and 3 right now. Tony Kart Racer in our YouTube chat has a 4th different winner. Jose Soria is his pick for today's action. Who's going to win? I mean, it's anyone's game, and I really do think maybe in the future we can get some kind of system that lets our viewers interact with us and maybe share their predictions with the commentary booth as well. It's been great to follow along with some drivers who clearly know what they're talking about when it comes to strategy. For example, Matthew Presley, and that's hopefully what we'll see a week from now as well. This fixed 500 is a lot of fun, but it's just that. It is fun for so many of these drivers. The real work has been going on not just for weeks, but for months in some cases, building qualifying setups, perfecting race trim as well. And it all culminates in the 12th annual iRacing Indy 500. And you can catch it live and uninterrupted here on RaceSpotTV. Coverage will kick off at 10 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, and 1 p.m. Eastern. Got that the wrong way around, but that's because West Coast really is the best coast. At the line, 30 laps to go. Fuel window is now open, Justin. Who comes down onto the lane this time around?
That's going to be a big question right now, as the undercut could be fairly powerful with how this is all played out. We'll have to see, though. Honestly, it could be any one of these drivers, but anyone second on back's in a good position to be able to come on in and duck on down. Kraus, though, has a good buffer to be able to come in without a driver immediately falling on suit. So we'll have to see if anyone takes that quick turn to the left. No one inside the top 3 or in the top 4 quite yet. They're electing to stay butting up together. They have a window of a few laps to go to do this, as Kerwin over the gearbox. This time, let's go.
Almost a bump draft there from the eNASCAR Coca-Cola driver. I think recognizing that he can't afford to try and fight side by side with the tires as worn as they are. 29 laps to go, and the gap to Wilson NATO, by the way, is down to 4.6 seconds. Keep your eyes out on that one, because if we have done the math correctly, he is looking at a pit stop that might be half the time that these cars spend on pit lane. That would cycle him straight to the front of the field in the purple and black. This time out of turn 4, Kerwin comes down. He's followed down by Jose Soria, Justin.
And that may be a powerful move here. We'll have to see how this plays out for Kerwin. We've seen the undercut has gained a few tenths of a second on some of these sequences. Kerwin went a bit more conservative on that entry, especially with Soria coming from behind to make sure that he was good to go to get into the box. But the race leaders now will have to see how Kraus and Malechka respond, knowing that 3rd and 4th have already ducked down into the lane.
That's Ferreira, Newsom, and Olsen, who are having a bit of a scrap. We took a look at the aerial look of that action for just a moment. Here's the race leaders, though. Does Kraus come down this time around? He's already committed to the inside. He is down on pit road. Robert Malechka stays out there And for a car that has been in control for so long, I wonder if the 5 has left it just a little bit too late. Huge lockup, by the way, from Kraus in the 7. Not sure if that's going to give him a penalty, Sommel.
Yeah, let's take a look at that one. If it is a speeding one, we shall get an idea of it right away. But Maleshka, he's trying something different. He's backing his approach. And you're right, Arjuna. I wonder whether it's a bit too late.
Into the box for Kraus. He's been stationary already now for about 6 seconds or so. 8.8 is the total time. Once more able to get away without any sort of pit lane penalty. There comes Malechka down onto the lane. Look at how deep he's leaving it under the brakes. He knows this is his chance to win at Indy. Take a look at this entry, by the way, for Kraus as well. He's got onto the brakes as late as he can. Locks up not just the left front, but the right front as well. He'll be very lucky not to have any sort of penalty. Where has Philip Kraus cycled out in relation to Casey Kerwin? He's 0.8 of a second clear. Not what we expected. Malechka into the box, a little bit deep if you ask me. Final time, he will get 4 sets of Firestone tires. 3 cars out of turn number 4. Malechka off the jacks, rolling already as he releases the pit lane limiter. Here comes Phil Kraus in towards turn number 1. It's going to be close, but it's going to be Kraus to the net race lead.
And I think Kraus had the better entry. He pushed the limits of that we've seen from how close he was to the speed limit compared to Kerwin. Was a bit more conservative on the brakes. That might have been enough to be able to gain that little extra buffer. Here's the thing though. Kerwin took a little bit less fuel in the tank, it appears. A bit quicker of a pit stop by about half a second. So we'll see how much that affects Kerwin's car. Don't forget, Nato's still on the racetrack here on his 19th lap coming up this time by in his stint. And that is still going to be off by 6 laps to make it.
Well, the important thing, the gap between Nato and Kraus, 29.4 seconds. Now, the time that Kraus just spent in pit lane was 35 seconds, and that does not include the time it takes him to get up to and get down to pit road speed limit. So, it's going to be close, but for Wilson Nato, if he can extend the gap, if he doesn't take tires, he might cycle his way back to the front. Now, though, the question for me, is it Kraus, is it Kerwin? Because Robert Malechka here, Sommel, finds himself in net 4th position behind Jose Soria.
Exactly. So this is going to be fun. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going to happen here. They will, of course, eventually duel out on track, but I'm more curious about what happens to Nato. So if he does not take tires, for instance, is that going to work out in the end? Is he going to have enough pace on that car to keep the position up ahead? We've seen today that having that downforce makes passing so hard. He's got to sustain it. This is going to be incredible to watch in the last stint. What kind of questions are we going to get answered here? They've been building it up for so many laps. Now is the moment.
Well, the first answer I got the last time at the line, it was 0.6 quicker almost for Phil Kraus over Wilson Nato. So the gap is now 29 seconds and shrinking as Ferreira in the 25 car comes down onto the lane for the final time in today's action. Nato, 41.451 the last time around. Casey Kerwin, a 41.258. There are 0.1 of a second in this battle right now, and you're taking a look at Jose Soria, Justin, trying to get onto the back of Kerwin. These cars cannot afford to start mixing it up with one another until Nato comes down onto pit road.
Yeah, could lose them a bit of time compared to some of their net right now. Keep in mind that Kraus, I think, is more so focused on trying to defend Kerwin than what Nato's thinking about right now, because I noticed he ran the 3rd groove last time by the same line as Kerwin, and that took a lot of that clean air away from Kerwin and forced him to bobble around a little bit. Now Kerwin goes for it!
He almost made contact with the back of Kraus. He will slide his way then into 3rd, net 3rd, because Soria around the outside. That was bold. I'm not sure if that was a bit naughty as well, because I took a look away for just a brief moment there. And then when I looked up, it was Kerwin almost sideways, almost losing control as well. It is 21 laps to go, and well, Sommel, the elbows are coming out.
The elbows are coming out, as I mentioned early on. It's like Speed Racer. They've got their spikes coming out of their rims. They are fighting this so hard, and I love it. That's the kind of intensity you tune in to watch. That's the kind of stuff you actually pay to watch in real life as well. Oh boy, this is going to be interesting. Let's hope that it does not go all pear-shaped for somebody, because this battle, well, it's turning out to be a multi-dimensional one, and I'm loving it.
Well, and all of this commotion, chaos. I don't know what the right word is in this point in time, but all they're doing, as Christian Steele from Team i5G has pointed out in the YouTube chat, they're just allowing each other to get slowed down and letting NATO build the gap up once more, side by side, as Soria looks to the outside of turn 3. That is bold and that is confidence. Through turn 4, he's going to pinch Kraus down to the white line, and side by side out of turn 4. This is a preview of what we might see come the checkered flag. It's a drag race to the line. It's Kraus who will win out. It's Soria that gets the outside momentum for turn number 1, though. Can he get through into the race lead, Justin?
Answer is no for now, but that groove, if you can keep it side by side like that, I think is going to be beneficial. But now I think Kraus has realized that Soria has found some great rhythm and pace here all of a sudden. Now he's trying to break up this draft. Remember, we talked about this. Expected some back and forth with the swamp draft from earlier. Now Soria having to race the hardest he's had to race all race long, and Kraus now takes the air away.
I hope Wilson Nato is being told about this. No bias. I just hope he's aware that he's still in with a shot of winning this, because the gap now is 29.6. Here comes Kerwin to get past Soria. There's almost contact between all three of them for a moment. Kerwin's going to have to fall back into net third position for now, but it's intensifying, and the one car you don't see, Sommel, is Robert Malechka.
Exactly, Malechka's strategy has not paid off for him. Perhaps he should have gone there a couple of laps ago. And look at the intense swerving going on right there. Kraus does not want the draft to be given to anyone. Even though the cars are hampered by downforce in the corner in terms of passing, Kraus recognizes it. Kraus wants to keep a hold of it. He's grabbed onto it like a little child grabs onto the finger of their mother right now. That is intense. Look at the swerving, man.
The gap between NATO and Kraus, 29.8 seconds. Never say never, Justin. It might still swing into the path of the Brazilian.
And Kerwin had to go into a 4-tire drift that corner, in fact, and lost himself a ton of time in this pack. It's going to be intriguing. Absolutely. If they keep on fighting and weaving back and forth with the snake like this, absolutely there is a chance if they lose enough time. And it's currently going towards his direction, Wilson Nato's way. He needs them to lose several more seconds, though, for this to fully work out, I think, with 17 laps to go this time.
And I think Kerwin has overheated his tires. What can he do to close the gap back now? He might be staring and not even finishing on the podium, which would be a shame, given the strength he has shown today. Two cars yet to come down onto pit road. It's Wilson Nato and Eddie Morales. And Morales is hoping for a late race caution and to see everyone follow him down onto pit road. But with 16 laps to go, it's looking increasingly doubtful that that's going to be the situation that plays out. You'll notice, Sommel, the gap between Nato and Kraus is now above 30 seconds.
It is indeed looking a bit tricky for NATO right now. We'll still see what happens on the pit road. It's still a matter of speculation at this stage. Now this is going to be fun. Last 15 odd laps, NATO is going to have to put in some things really special. And as Justin mentioned, you have to back your strategy. Good on NATO for backing it all the way through, but what you're seeing right now is pretty much for the lead.
Malechka has really dropped off now. 1 second adrift from Kerwin. A shame for him. The strategy just not cycling through in his favor. Has been unable to adapt that car to the additional dirty air in the closing stages. It's 15 laps to go, and it's Wilson Nato who still leads out of turn 2, working lap 28 on his stint. He will be down onto the lane in just a couple of laps time, and this is just a preview of the action that we'll see next week. I did mention it slightly earlier, Justin. This is a bit of fun, especially if you talk to someone like Casey Kerwin. The focus is on next week. Kraus wants to win here today, but he's more, I think, demanding that he wins in the month of May in the Open 500.
Yeah, but this would be great momentum to start off with a major win like this in the fixed 500. This is also valuable seat time to be able to race against high-powered competition. Here we go again down the back straightaway, though. Look at this move from Soria.
Pinching Kraus all the way to the inside. There's almost wheel-to-wheel contact. Can Soria around the outside make his way into the net race lead? Not for now. Morales is down on pit road, so expect NATO down in just 1 lap time. We will get the answer that we have been waiting for. It's still ducking and diving. It was a contact with the pit wall there for one of the two cars. They're still side by side in through turn 1, Sommel. Here comes Jose Soria on the outside line.
This is his chance for Soria. He's been lining it up for quite a while. Side by side they go. Who's got the edge?
For now, they're still side by side. NATO down on the pit road. as they fight themselves side by side into turn 3. They continue to check up the momentum. The gap coming down onto the lane was 31 seconds, and Casey Kerwin is once more right in the thick of things. Money stop now for Wilson Nato. What can the Brazilian do? This will be short. No tires taken there in the 23 car. Left side of the screen, they're coming down in towards turn number 1. Nato builds up his momentum. Still almost 3 wide into turn 1. Nato will be in the race lead here, Justin.
Still going to need a close up about a couple seconds or so to be able to be up inside their draft, but it's still going to be in a great position to be able to try and see what he can do. He's going to catch onto the draft, I think, of Malechka, in fact, to stay within range of these drivers.
I thought for a second Nato rolled off the lane early enough. He is now going to be compromised on the worn tires and lots of dirty air in front, so it did not cycle in the favor of Nato. Now, Kraus, Soria, or Kerwin. Don't count out Malechka as well here. Sommel, who knows, maybe he's been taking care of his tires. Maybe he can spring a bit of a surprise.
I doubt that is going to be this way, but we are seeing this lovely three-way fight that's been going on for quite a while right now. Nato, he tried, it did not work for him. Full credits for giving the effort though. He backed it all the way through. But this is where the fun really begins. I spoke about that climax right at the very end. This is it, no considering anything else. It's going to be a proper shootout right down to the very end. All about who wants it the most.
And Matthew Presley in the YouTube chat wondering if Nato took tires. 5.7. It's possible he did take tires with that pit stop time, but I would be very doubtful given what we saw on the right side of the screen. It is intensifying now at the front of the field. 11 laps to go. 2 drivers who have been very confident in the Dallara IR18 over the last couple of weeks. 1 week ago, they were dueling it out at Watkins Glen. Phil Kraus getting a 2nd place in the season opener of the ISO WC. Jose Soria settled for 7th. A good fight between him and Brian Carey all the way to the finish line. Both of these drivers felt confident coming into the week, and well, confidence, Justin, can sometimes be what drives you to the front of the field.
There's a saying, confidence is speed, and that has been the case throughout this race. If you've had the confidence to make it stick, you've likely had the speed, and especially with the downforce, you have the trust in it. Soria nearly clapped the wall that time, though, coming to 10 to go and slips and slides out of the groove.
25 miles. It's crazy. You go for 475. You find yourself surviving through some chaos and 3 safety cars. Now it comes down to this. The sprint to the end. Ducking and diving is Phil Kraus out front with Jose Soria in 2nd, 3/10 behind Casey Kerwin, an eNASCAR Coca-Cola driver, rounding out the podium positions, but he's being chased down by Robert Malechka. And guess what? Wilson Nato, it's only 2 seconds adrift. He might not have tires, Sommel, but if these cars out front come to blows, the Brazilian might be there to pick up the pieces.
Exactly, that could be a very realistic possibility, but take a look at this one. Malechka has caught up, by the way, to Kerwin, and Kerwin has had a superb race so far, so don't count Malechka out as well. But what's happening, unfortunately, in terms of the bigger battle, is that they have formed their own split. If they fight amongst each other, the guys at the top, Trost and Soria, can be left to themselves to duel it out right there by themselves. So, last 9 laps, Arjuna, this, they're going to be fighting so hard. This is going to be so onerous now.
And like I said, it's only fitting that we're starting off the iRacing month of May on the same day as the Indy GP kicks off the real world month of May. They're driving down the main straight the correct direction, which they aren't doing here in the real world today. It's still Kraus at the line by 0.3 of a second. He has now got the buffer that he will want, with tires starting to wear as well, Justin. All of the top 4 contenders now 20 laps into their stint.
And this is going to be the tough part. We've seen that the swap draft has been most powerful in the first 6 to 10 laps of a stint on the tires, and that's why I think Soria was pushing so hard to try and get side by side before. Now, it's about trying to, I think, save a bit of those tires, because he may have only a couple realistic shots to try and make the move, even with 7 laps to go because of the aero wash. This draft continues to be broken up too, which is not helping at all to try and match line for line to keep up that speed. This is scrubbing speed off all of them.
Well, I think Soria has maybe already thrown in the white flag, because I'm seeing in the session chat here, Sommel, he's already put in those 2 famous words, not just in sim racing, but across all of esports, as Kerwin up into the outside wall. He will be hoping not to have incurred too much damage in the closing 7 laps of the race. Those 2 letters from Jose Soria, all gamers know them, GG. to Kerwin. Oh, he's still got the speed on his side. That was a close moment for the eNASCAR Coca-Cola driver from XSET Racing. Down across the start-finish line with 6 laps to go, Sommel.
Exactly. Not too long now. It's what they call a dash to the line. And for Kerwin right now, it's a precarious position to be in. Look at how much he's sliding. Look at how little grip there is available now. And this is all about the heart and desire right now. And it all that you've been working on for the last 190 odd laps, it pays off here.
Gap between first and second, 3/10, and Kerwin is now falling off the back of this as well. So it will be a two-horse race. We have 5 laps to go at the line here, Justin. Kraus looks in control. And what can Soria do to try and be side by side at the checkered?
Well, the main thing he can do is save the tires, try and cool down the tire temp, see if he can try and get a run. That's the first thing. The second thing is going to need to close up this 4/10 of a second gap, which is easier said than done with the amount of air wash. The third thing is going to be hope for a mistake. If you get 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 of those things in particular, I should say, you're in a good spot. Right now, though, it's easier said than very much done, because right now, Soria seems to be struggling a little bit now that he's losing those tires.
Once more across the yard of bricks, Phil Kraus will lead 4 laps to go. And for Team Talent, they will be cheering on their man. What can he do? The 2020 Indy Elite champion. He's been a rough 2021 with the champion's curse afflicting Kraus, so I don't think believes in superstition like that. But now, focusing on the month of May, last week went very well for him. Lots of confidence on his side, and the gap to Soria is up above half a second now. Kerwin falls a full second behind the race leader. He'll be looking in his rear-view mirrors here, Sommel, for Malechka and Nato to maybe steal that 3rd and final podium position.
Absolutely. Seems to be less pressure now for Kerwin because Malechka has fallen back slightly. Maybe his tire is doing some tricks on him as well. But for a while it seemed like we would be getting a big four-way shot for the win. It's still not over though. One special lap from Soria, some momentum that he gains in, or perhaps a minor mistake by Kraus, and it could be all open yet again. But Justin's pick was all right. No, goodness, what's happened here?
And that's going to end the race if Alexis Newsom doesn't clear the track in time. The yellow flag flies for the 4th time today, and it's Phil Kraus that wins the 2021 iRacing Fixed 500. Equal chances for all 33 drivers, but it was Phil Kraus controlling his destiny, and he'll take the checkered flag in just 5 miles' time. Dramatic end and a disappointing finish, I'm sure, for Alexis Newsom, part now of the 3 Crowns Racing with Indy Alliance program. But my word, what a day comes to a close in such a disappointing fashion, Justin.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see how it would have played out, but Kraus was in the perfect position to defend. He played this race well. He's been dominant all race. For Newsom, just pushed off the turn 4 into the wall and slides up into the racing groove. Nothing that Alexis could do. That car completely demolished after the hard contact to the inside wall. Just a lap and a half away for Phil Kraus to celebrate.
What a day. What a race as well. I mean, we were a bit pessimistic, it's not the right word, Sommel. A bit suspicious and wary of what we were going to get. This was beyond my wildest expectations. Such an entertaining race, and well, we'll do it all over again in just 7 days' time. This time, though, it's the one that everyone wants to win, the 12th annual iRacing Indy 500.
Exactly, Arjuna. That's what racing should do to you. Keep you at the edge of your seat right down to the very end, and this one did. And full credits to Philip Kraus. Justin guessed it correctly. Kraus was holding on to his nerve so well, and some might say that yeah, he got lucky at the end because of the caution, but he got rewarded for all the good work that he did. It compounded and it pays off right here. Now I wonder what happens next week at the full Indy 500. How well does he perform when we do inculcate setups in? But if this goes to show anything, it's that on the driving front, you can't take anything away from Kraus. And I wonder what Soria does as well, because that was turning out to be such a fun battle.
White flag in the air at the same time as the caution. Maybe I need to ask RaceSpot's own Aaron Likings exactly how you would fly both of those flags at the same time in his spot up there on the start-finish line. For Kraus, though, what a month of May. I mean, last week it was impervious. The drive that he had, qualified on the outside of the front row, cycled back to 8th at one point in time, around the outside of the toe, around the iRacing Rallycross World Champion Johan Harth. He took confidence from that move, and he's parlayed it straight into his iRacing month of May. And victory here in the Fixed 500 will set up a challenge in 7 days' time, as he looks to be the first and potentially the only to win both the Fixed and Open races in the same year. Very entertaining race, Justin, I must say, and trying to think about what it means for the Open race. We talked about the experience that cars are going to take into that one. I wonder what Kraus has learned, and we'll talk to him in victory lane in just a few moments' time.
Curious what he says as well, because we definitely seen how drivers will race against one errors. The importance of clean air is also another thing we picked up upon, but also I think picking up on how to defend in clutch situations, in big moments such as this, is also going to be very helpful, as well as getting to adapt to the potential hot temperatures and what weather could be happening for the Open side of things. But overall, Kraus executed this race well. He led a majority of the laps today to be able to dominate this race for much of the day, and now gets a chance to celebrate this time around.
He signed up with Team Talent earlier in 2021, and I mean, how much better can you really expect the month of May to go? Full focus now on what's ahead, but for today, it's victory lane for Phil Kraus in the 7, and Team Talent will celebrate another victory here at the Brickyard. We'll get the photo finish as well. In second place, Jose Soria. Great drive from the Oris Racing Team driver there. Great to see him adapting to the Dallara IRA team very well as he gets into his open wheel campaign. Casey Kerwin, the eNASCAR Coca-Cola driver, 9 positions gained, and he rounds off the podium positions. Great race, Sobel, and I mean, one of us was right there, but I really think all of us just enjoyed the last couple of hours way more than we thought we would.
We did. I love it. I love it when a race makes you think, makes you wonder what's going to happen eventually. And in this case, call it a bit of an anticlimactic ending. Yeah, whatever, but think of all the drama it created midway through. Amazing. It was just a good mix. Nothing over the top, no excess drama, and just enough crashes. There's not too much to make you wonder, oh man, this is a crash fest. There's just enough to keep you entertained. Amazing, and I can only wonder what happens a week from now when we get to the real Indy 500. That's going to be intense, isn't it?
Burn the house down, Phil. The day is yours. And what a day it was for Team Talent. The pink, purple, and silver in victory lane. Donuts right across the yard of bricks. Maybe you'll celebrate with a glass of milk as well. And we will talk to the driver from Appleton, Wisconsin then in just a few moments' time. Wonderful 500 miles of action here in the second annual iRacing Fixed 500. Last year it was Sage Karam taking victory. This year it's Team Talent and Phil Kraus. Let's take a look then at your unofficial race results here in 2021. It was Phil Kraus on top of the pile, finishing under caution unfortunately, but 2/10 separates him and Jose Soria. Would have been an interesting drag race with the 7 and the 14 coming to the end. But at the end of the day, the Oris Racing Team driver will be pretty content with second place. Casey Kerwin in third. Great drive for the Exet Racing Team there. Now, who knows, maybe if not for that contact with the wall, it might have been Kerwin fighting for first and second. Robert Malechka will be very thrilled about his debut here on the Brickyard. A fourth place for him with Wilson Nato on that alternate strategy, cycling into fifth. Carlos Villegas in sixth with Polino Ferreira in seventh. Bono Huis manages to get up into 8th with 22 positions gained there for the Mercedes AMG sim racing driver. Andrew Roos and Hugo Olsen, the 2020 Open Wheels 500 winner, rounds out the top 10. Edu Morales, last car on the lead lap, finishing in 11th, where you then start to find some of the cars that went through the wars. Severi Seppa finishes 2 laps down along with Riley Thompson for Total Downforce Racing. Alexis Newsom brought out the caution that finished the race. She finishes in 14th with Dylan Freckleton, the first of our retirees, in 15th. Alessandro Bico, Jason Brophy, Rodrigo Franzoni, Nathan Lewis, and Michael A. Overbait complete the top 20. 21st position, it is Graham Carroll for the Red Bull Racing Esports team, with Brandon Trost in the pink 24, finishing in 22nd. Jake Matheson in 23rd, along with Rafael Aquesta, Yao Romanov, Ozin Walsh, Ryan Duchette, Diogo C. Pinto, Brian Beard, Yao Vaz, the top 30, with 3 final retirees very early in this race. It was Michael Remanders, Jesper Orman, and Zeke Willis, the 31st through 33rd car in today's field. So, top to bottom look there at the race results, and let's dive straight into our post-race interviews if we can. I do believe the man himself is standing by. Phil, we got a copy with you.
10-4.
Phil, congratulations. You were confident last week after the first round of the ISOWC. What are you feeling like now? No longer confident, I'm sure, on top of the world.
I don't think I can put that into words, to be honest with you. It feels really good. That was super intense at the end there. Like, on the last pit stop, I accidentally put in half a gallon less than I needed to make it to the end. So I was trying to do the hardest save possible, making my car as wide as possible, and I got close to getting myself taken out a few times for sure, but I felt like it's what I had to do in order to hold on to the win.
33 drivers, equal setup, one chance, and it was really left in your control there to decide strategy, how you were going to play the race. It was interesting, lots of elbows getting out there. Did you know that you just needed to be out front in those closing 10 laps to think you still had a chance of taking the checkered flag?
Oh yeah, definitely. There was a run in the middle of the race where I was behind Robert, I believe, and I found it really hard to get back to him on older tires, and I knew at the end of the race we were going to be on relatively old tires, so I thought to myself on the last stop, if I didn't come out first, obviously I needed to be in the lead by at least 15 to go, or I probably wasn't going to have a realistic chance of getting back past, because obviously the later you go, there's going to be a ton of swerving and all that, and it's going to be even harder to build runs.
We talked to Brandon Trano midway through that race, Phil, and he was talking about the fact that this is, for all of the teams, a data-gathering, learning opportunity heading into next weekend. And this is important, no doubt about it, the second annual iRacing Fixed 500, but next weekend's the big one, the 12th annual iRacing 500. I know you guys want to win there. How confident are you feeling about your chances, and what did you really take out of today's race?
I'm feeling pretty confident about the Open 500. Elite earlier this year at a Team Talent front row lockout, I believe, so hopefully we can carry that form over. Obviously, nothing's a given, and everyone's been working really hard to find pace out of these cars, but we're hoping that we'll end up in the same spot, but obviously no guarantees, but...
Well, I'll tell you what, if Tanner Watkins is listening, he will want to repeat what happened in that elite race earlier this season where he finally took a victory at the Brickyard. It was close for him last year. He'll be hoping to go one better, and I'm sure the entire Team Talent team does as well. Phil, we don't usually do this, but given, I think, the manner of victory there, very entertaining race, who from Team Talent do you need a shout-out right now?
Jason Brophy and Dakota. They were, after Jason crashed out in the pits on, I believe, I don't know, it was around lap 110, 120 or so. He was sitting on the box, helping me out a lot, keeping me updated on what fuel I needed to hit and all that fun stuff. And then Dakota was there for the first 100, so Laps News doing a great job as well. Really appreciate those guys. Don't think I would have done it without them.
Congratulations, Phil. Great race, and great to see you in victory lane here at the Brickyard.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Phil Kraus, confidence and excitement in his voice. Let's rumble on through these post-race interviews. Think we have Jose Soria standing by. Jose, do we have a copy with you?
Yeah, yep. Hello, guys.
Hey, Jose, great to see you in the IndyCar for the second time in consecutive weekends. The ISOWC round number 1 was quite an interesting battle for you. This time on the oval, how are you enjoying this transition to the IR18?
Well, it's been pretty fun. I mean, I didn't really get much practice for the race itself. I only did quali laps before and a few runs, I think, in the before the race in the pre-race practice. So it took a while to adapt the first laps. I actually did the race yesterday, the first time slot for this one. So I learned a lot there. I also finished P2 there, but I also led a lot of laps, so I knew that it was going to be pretty competitive here. And well, it's been super fun. I mean, I think the racing that you have seen speaks for itself, really. Pretty close for all the top 4. At the end, I think even the guys on another pit strategy were near the top as well. So, yeah, all in all, quite a nice experience for me.
And you have experience in a lot of cars on the iRacing service, Jose. What's it like for Oris having you and Javi Ross in the ISOWC? You're clearly here in the Fixed 500. Are we going to see you guys making a crack at the Open 500 in just 7 days' time?
Well, I would love to, but the thing is, we have absolutely zero experience like making setups, so we are probably not gonna make it anywhere near the top split, because last year we tried, but it was only with the BRS setup, and yeah, obviously we were near the top, so hopefully we'll try to get somebody to help us, and yeah, we'll try to get a crack at it.
In your opinion, Jose, I saw you put the GG message, I think it was with 5 laps to go there. Did you think in the closing stages, caution or no caution, it was Phil's to lose, and once you were unable to get on pass, it was really his to control?
Yeah, that's what I put the message really well. I actually hit the wall just before the lap before I put that message in the chat. I hit the wall coming out of 2, I think. So, or no, it was turn 3, I think. So I'm pretty sure that I bent the floor of the car there. So I was sure that I was going to lose top speed, and even Casey was going to pass me. But I guess I got lucky with the new damage model, and it didn't actually break the car. But yeah, anyways, I think Phil was gonna get it. It was super hard for me to pass. I tried absolutely everything that I knew with this car, and it was impossible. I got to the outside of him a few times in turn 1, but it was impossible. He just held the inside.
Congratulations on second, Jose. Great to see you in the IndyCar, and hopefully we'll see you again in just 7 days' time.
Thanks, guys.
So Jose Soria from the Oris Racing team. One final podium interview to get to, and it's the eNASCAR Coca-Cola driver of Casey Kerwin. Casey, great to see you in the IndyCar. Interesting race for you there. How did you enjoy some open wheel action here at the Brickyard?
Oh yeah, I had a great time. I didn't really know what to expect. I kind of qualified into this deal last minute last night, so I ran the race last night to get some practice, and it definitely helped figure out all the strategies and how to move around and stuff like that. So. Yeah, but I had a great time, especially there at the end. It was really, really intense, and it was fun, you know, trying to manage the dirty air and move around all over the place to find air and get a big run. So I came close a couple times to almost getting by Jose, and then maybe I could have had a shot at it, but just didn't quite get there. So, but I still had a great time.
What's the biggest difference that you really had to deal with, Casey? Because I'm guessing not much practice because you've got bigger things to deal with this upcoming week. A stock car versus an open wheel car, dirty air is probably a big factor that's different in how you adapt to it in each of the machines.
Yeah, like we definitely, especially on the mile and a half stuff, have dirty air now, but it's nowhere near as extreme as this, and especially because we're going 230 miles an hour. If you've got to lift just slightly more, you lose a ton of time. So, but it was nice to be able to work around. You know, I mean, I think even one point I was like dang near in the 4th lane into turn 3 sometimes just to get air. I felt like we had a little bit more opportunity to move around, a little bit more than what we do on the NASCAR side. So that was nice. But yeah, the dirty air is just a lot more extreme. But then the draft makes up for it too. So it kind of evens out. But yeah, and then it's just you're doing it at such a high rate of speed. If you barely mess up, you're knocking the fence down. So, but it was a fun challenge, for sure.
Well, back to the stock car you go, and to a road course this coming week, Casey, at the Circuit of the Americas. Let's quickly just ask you about that. How's your preparation going? How are you feeling about maybe making it another winner in this crazy season that's been 2021?
Yeah, I obviously, you know, Bobby hasn't won or hasn't lost in, what, 4 or 5 years now, and you got Mitchell in there now too, so... but I feel good. I've always really enjoyed the road courses, and especially over the past year, I feel like I've gotten a lot better at them, and I feel like I'm in a good spot. So the biggest thing is we haven't dialed in a good set the past few times we've gone to road courses. So, but I feel really good about what we have so far. So hopefully we can, you know, put it to him a little bit. You know, I'm not sure. It's definitely hard to say like, yeah, we're gonna go out and go try and beat Bobby or Mitchell, but I definitely think we can get a good run, and you know, if we can somehow be competing with them for a win, then that'd be fantastic.
Well, great to see you in action here today, Casey. We'll be cheering you on this coming Tuesday. Good luck in the Lone Star State.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
That was Casey Kerwin, driver from XSET Gaming, and third and final podium finisher here today. Time to wrap up then from the Brickyard, at least for now. We will be back in just 7 days' time for the iRacing Indy 500, the 12th annual running of the race, as Brandon Trainer looks to write history as the 3rd champion there. Before we go, brief thoughts from Justin Prince and Samuel Aurora on the action that we've just witnessed. Justin, I mean, you and I have seen some really good IndyCar action in 2021. It continued here today. It will continue through the month of May.
Definitely an intriguing race, especially when it came down to the strategies, when it came down to some of the battles, but in the end, it was Philip Kraus who led a majority of the laps, 109 to 200 laps, to be able to take home this checker flag. He had the speed, he had the qualifying ability, he had the ability to utilize the clean air and the swap draft to take home that checkered flag, Arjuna.
And Sommel, how about you? I mean, the month of May, it's such a special time, and we're kicking it off here on the virtual world on the same day that's getting underway in the real world as well. Such an exciting time, and it's so special to be part of it here on the iRacing service.
100% Arjuna. What a way to kick off the month of May, and the best thing that I can say is that it can only just get better. Believe it or not, even after all the craziness and such an entertaining race that we saw today, it's only just gonna ramp up in the terms of intensity. I can't wait to see which way it goes in the end.
So 33 drivers came into the Brickyard here today with equal chances, but it was Phil Kraus writing his name into the history book as the second winner here of the Fixed 500. RaceSpotTV has been delighted to bring you uninterrupted coverage once more here in the month of May, and we will continue it next weekend as well. My name is Arjuna Kankipati. I've been joined by the wonderful Justin Prince and Sommel Aurora, with Hugo Luis down in the production booth controlling all of the action. TV cameras provided to us by Istvan Ballo and TrackCams22.com, with additional car cameras designed by RaceSpot's own Tyler Maxson. Live timing and scoring powered by our partners at timing71.org, where you can follow along with the best in the real and virtual worlds of motorsport using their world-class suite of data analysis tools. The month of May is well and truly underway, and it all continues here live on RaceSpotTV in just 7 days' time. May 22nd at 5 p.m. UTC, that's 1 p.m. Eastern, and 10 a.m. Pacific, we will be live for the 12th annual iRacing Indy 500. And my word, given what we saw here today, how exciting is that going to be? So long and goodbye, but now it's all about Phil Kraus in victory lane.